Hello guys, welcome to novel Reincarnated as a Stick. This is a great novel and I hope you will enjoy. Chapter 1. Prologue. In a certain location found in the vast space constituting the universe, one could find a part of it act as a separate dimension. This so-called dimension houses multiple beings that wield power on the levels of gods. Of course, that was because these beings are actual, living, breathing gods. It is only known by a singular name, which was the celestial plane. Within a certain part of this plane, one would find a floating white cube. Inside this cube was a woman whose appearance and body could be said to have reached the pinnacle of beauty. It was as if she was made out of finely chiseled marble, complementing the white walls inside the cube. Her hair was pitch black, mesmerizing like the void that constituted the majority of space. On the other hand, her irises and lips were of a crimson red hue, making anyone that looked at it feel like she was seducing them. Then again, she wore a white dress which seemed to balance out those characteristics, radiating an aura that made her look like a radiant goddess of purity. However, she was no radiant goddess of purity at all, with her personality that could be summed up in one word: bipolar. There were times where she would act sweet and lovable, radiating an aura that made anyone want to rely on her. There were also times where she would indifferently torture living beings, either for pleasure, entertainment, or to stave off boredom. She would unhesitatingly put them in a living hell, ignoring the incessant curses that came out of the mouths of which she tortured. Of course, there were also times where she would show both sides at once, putting living beings in a state of confusion, making one wonder which one was the real her. Taking her name into consideration, one would surely think that personality quite suited her. Her name was Kurahana, a being well known as the goddess that had superb control over the law of reincarnation. At this moment, she was currently looking through a glass orb she had bought from somewhere, scanning through the nigh-infinite amount of living beings dotted throughout the whole universe. The reason as to why she was doing this was because she needed a suitable living being to become the main soul of her future masterwork weapon. A weapon that would allow her to wield power surpassing her peers of the same level. Whoosh! Whoosh! Just as she was swiping left to the next living being on her glass orb, the image that was being shown on the orb had transformed into darkness in an instant, with a few words appearing not long after. Lumina wants to call me? Kurahana could not help but wonder as to why a goddess on the same level as her would call her at this time, seeing as the celestial plane was in a state of peace. Nevertheless, she accepted the request, the sight of a cute woman that looked like she was in her 20s appearing on Kurahana's orb soon after. Yoo-hoo! It's been a while since I last saw you. Kurahana, the energetic voice of Lumina, started to resound from the orb, making Kurahana scratch her head as she replied soon after. We met like a few hours ago in the Hall of Greater Divinity, Lumina. Anyways, what's the reason for calling me? You know me very well, right? Lumina asked in response. Before continuing, I have a lot of connections throughout the celestial plane, especially the gods at the same level as us. Yeah, Kurahana replied in slight annoyance, waving her hand to and fro as she added, get to the point. Well, I've heard some rumors from the other gods that some low-level demons have been invading their private worlds. Just wanted to tell you that you should make sure that your world is free from demons, seeing as you're one of the best blacksmiths in the celestial plane. Lumina decided to not beat around the bush this time, getting straight to the point with a light smile on her face. I also wanted to tell you that if you need help setting up protection from those demons, you should call me sometime. My control over the law of light is not something to scoff at. You know I'll keep that in mind, Kurahana responded after a few seconds of silence, ending the call between them abruptly without saying farewell. She then sat in silence for a while, pondering over Lumina's words as she softly muttered, since only low-level demons are attacking, for now, I shouldn't worry that much. Let's get back to searching a suitable soul for the main material of my magnum opus. After saying that, she went back to looking through a list of suitable living beings on her glass orb, eventually stopping on a certain living being with a slight grin on her face. Ho! That kind of experience will surely be invaluable. You'll be the one then. Bang! As if it was some sort of heavenly judgment, the house of a certain person was struck by a huge bolt of lightning, around 20 times as big as a normal bolt. Due to the size of the lightning bolt, it was a given that the house would be turned into charred bits and ashes, as well as the person who lived in it. Whoosh! A few seconds after the lightning strike, an incorporeal blob gradually manifested over the huge pile of ashes and charred bits, an aura of confusion radiating from it. What the heck happened? At this moment, the incorporeal blob was still quite clueless as to what had happened, only realizing what had happened after looking at its surroundings. After looking at his house, which resembled a landscape bombarded with nukes, Oris was at a loss for words. He also tried to look for his body, to which he had failed to do so. Eventually, Oris let out a sigh, muttering to himself, "Is this my punishment for playing ISE too much? If so, don't you think this is too much of an overkill, Heaven?" The acronym that Oris had mentioned was the MMORPG he had poured most of his time and effort into for quite a great portion of his life, named Infinite Stick Evolution. Although the name of the game sounded quite grand, it had lived up to its name, allowing players to play with an individualistic style, with there being near infinite possibilities. This was what drew Oris into the world of ISE, since the infinite possibilities of the game made him feel like he was the main character of the web novels he had read back then. If I knew that I was going to be punished, I would have tried to reach the existence level of divinity far earlier, Oris said to himself, slightly filled with regrets. I wonder what's going to happen to me next. Just as he asked this question, an invisible vortex appeared a small distance away from Oris, sucking Oris in with a faint swoop sound. Although he did not know that he was sucked into a vortex, the feeling of something pushing and pulling on his body made him quite nauseated. This feeling also made him realize that something related to his body was happening, though he could not figure out what it was. Fortunately, that sensation only lasted a short time, with Oris appearing in a place that was distant from where he was a few moments ago. While calming down his senses after going through such a nauseating experience, Oris could not help but steal a few glances at the surroundings, slightly shocked inside that everywhere he looked was pure white. The walls, the ceiling, the floor, hell, even the girl in front of him was pure white. Wait a second, a girl? Who are you? Although he was quite confused as to where he was, seeing as there was a human in front of him, he could not help but become vigilant. As for the girl in front of him, she could not help but lightly chuckle at Oris' question, replying with a light smile, "I'm Kurahana, the greater goddess of reincarnation. You're currently in my haven, this big white space you're currently looking at." Wait, what? Hearing the girl's response, Oris could not help but become confused. You're the greater goddess of reincarnation? And this white space thing is your haven? Yep. Kurahana nodded in response. Am I dreaming or something? Is this death of mine a dream in disguise? Realizing how far-fetched his current situation was, Oris could not help but mutter. Foosh! In an instant, an overbearing aura radiated from Kurahana, making Oris feel like he was in an area where the only two beings that existed there were him and Kurahana. Not only that, the feeling of imminent death even radiated from her body, also making Oris wonder as to what he had done wrong. Fortunately, that only lasted for a short while as Kurahana asked, "Is this enough proof for you to realize you're not dreaming?" Yeah, Oris hastily replied, slightly afraid of Kurahana. Nonetheless, Oris had no idea as to why he was brought here, and so, mustering his courage, he asked her, anyways, why did you bring me here?" "I have brought you here to give you another shot at life," Kurahana replied to his question, before adding, "You have two choices to choose from." Raising one finger, she continued, "The first choice is for you to be reborn through the 6 paths of reincarnation, which means that the chances of you becoming one of the 6 is equal. A celestial, an angel, a human, an animal, a ghost, or an Azura, it's basically up to luck if you get reborn as a human again. What about the second choice?" Oris could not help but ask, his opinion of the first choice being bad. Of course, if the second choice given to him was worse, then he'd pick the first one. Raising another finger, she answered Oris' question. "The second choice, although you won't be reborn as a human, you would have a way to become human. That is, you would be reborn as a stick." Oris was silent for a bit before responding, "Are you mocking me because I've been playing a game about sticks for a great portion of my life?" "No, not at all," Kurahana shook her head with a smile. "To be honest, I think that it's quite nice. Seeing your devotion towards one game makes me think you're a hard worker." Obtaining a rare compliment from a goddess rather than an insult, Oris' fear towards Kurahana slightly lessened as he looked at her in a slightly new perspective. Nevertheless, he had a question in mind related to the second choice. Say I choose the second choice. What can I do as a stick? Just hope to be swept away by the wind? If that's the case, how would I turn into a human? Oris asked her, to which Kurahana replied with, and this is why I praised you for your devotion towards the game. I'll be giving you 2 bonuses if you choose the second choice. Both being related to the game you were playing, Kurahana added. Hearing that there was a bonus if he chose the second choice, and not only was it 1 bonus but 2, and those 2 bonuses were both related to ISE, Oris could not help but ask, may I ask what those 2 bonuses are? The first bonus will allow you to live your life like you're playing the game, Kurahana replied with a light smile. Since you've reached quite a high level in the game, you have an idea why I told you it will give you a way to become human, right? Although Oris just responded with a short grunt, he was quite eager to choose the second choice in his mind. Living his life like a game, that was just a dream come true for him. How about the second bonus? He continued to ask, to which Kurahana replied with, the second bonus is related to the speed of your improvement. Using the terms from the game you play, the experience you need to level up your skills will be halved, is that correct? I choose the second choice. I've decided. Oris shouted without hesitation after hearing what the second bonus had in store for him. Although he would have chosen the second choice even with just the first bonus, he knew that with the second bonus, he would be able to get back to his previous standing at a faster speed, as well as live it out. I see. Kurahana nodded in response with a smile, before making a few gestures with both of her hands, glowing threads of formless energy appearing around Oris' incorporeal blob not long after. These threads then transformed into a bubble that covered Oris, the light they gave out gradually intensifying. With the bubble of formless energy surrounding Oris' body, Kurahana finished making gestures with her fingers before saying, well then. Let me congratulate you on being reborn as a stick. I also wish you the very best of luck. Whoosh! Whoosh! Just before the bubble of formless energy radiated light that covered the whole inside of Kurahana's space, Oris shouted out 2 words. Thank you. Whoosh! Soon after saying that, the bubble of formless energy had disappeared from Kurahana's space. Any trace of Oris being in her space was gone as well. At this moment, Kurahana let out a sigh before snapping her fingers, conjuring a chair that she sat on soon after. Afterward, she willed the glass orb she was using a while ago to come close to her, as she gestured with her hands one more time, infusing a bit of energy towards the glass orb in front of her, a grin could be seen on her face. And with that, let's start the nurturing process, shall we? Chapter 2. After a long while, Oris felt that he hit something hard. Ouch, he couldn't help but say. But although he said that, his voice couldn't be heard at all. It was as if it echoed within him. Well, that's weird. I feel like I can speak as much as I want, but I can't hear anything. At this moment, he tried to look at his surroundings, only to fail in vain. The reason behind this was that everything around him was pitch black. Is there any way to see? As this question popped up in his mind, a notification sound could be heard going off in his head. Ding! Soul Perception Eye has been unlocked. Whoosh! As if the colors started to coalesce towards Oris' eyes, the pitch-black surroundings turned into a myriad of colors that would make it seem like the situation a while ago was only dream. Though it wasn't for Oris. Being bombarded with a ton of colors all of a sudden made him feel like his eyes were going to tear apart. But for some reason, he felt nothing although he shouted in reflex. After a while, the colors dimmed down, allowing him to see everything around him. Taking his first glance at what surrounded him, he felt like this place was familiar. But in actuality, it really is familiar to him. Recalling all of the thoughts and memory that were surprisingly not wiped by Kurahana, a distant memory from his past surfaced in his mind. Are you serious? Oris couldn't believe it at all. The distant memory that surfaced was a time when multiple little branches tried to do whatever they can to progress in terms of level or skill. Although what surrounded Oris now was not sticks, but instead grass, the trees, rocks, and everything else was exceptionally similar to the ones in his memory. If my guess is right, this is the Forest of Beginnings. The Forest of Beginnings, the first place players would arrive at when they start playing Infinite Stick Evolution. To others, it was a hellish time since everyone did whatever they could. But for Oris, it just gave him a nostalgic feeling. Well, since I'm at the Forest of Beginnings, that means I have been reborn into the world of Eridinia. Eridinia, the world where ISE is based in, is surprisingly where Oris is reborn. He didn't know why Kurahana did this, but he wanted to say thanks at least. After looking at his surroundings, he turned his attention to his body. As said earlier, Oris would be reborn as a stick. And as expected, he was indeed reborn as a stick. Although there were different types of sticks since they came from different species of trees, Oris didn't bother to care about what type of stick he was since he would eventually find out once he leveled up. Speaking of which, if I was reborn into the world of Eridinia as a stick, does that mean that I have a system? Although you may not hear this, Oris, you definitely have a system. Didn't you hear the notification sound from before? Wait. Oris started to process what happened before he could see. I heard a notification sound and some voices, and then all of a sudden, I could see everything around me. Once he realized his current situation, his non-existent eyes gleamed. Could it be? Ding. The existence evolution system has been enabled. Setting user, Oris, as the owner of the system. Hearing the voices that echoed in his mind, Oris felt elated to know that the system in ISE was given to him. Is this the bonus Kurahana wanted to give me? If so, then this is a really good bonus. Although he wanted to be reborn as a stick, he wasn't sure what he wanted to do when he was reborn. But since he obtained the system from the game, he felt that his life had a direction now. First of all, since I have the system, I'll have to become a god-tier existence once more. I only played as a god for like a few days before inevitably dying. I still don't know why that lightning bolt killed me though. After dying, all he felt was disappointment that he was not going to be able to play as a god-tier existence in ISE anymore. Now that he had the system, even though it would take him a long while, he could reach the same height where he once was and even go further beyond. As he was going to check his current situation, a voice that was familiar to him started to speak in his head. Hello there, Oris. It's me, Kurahana. Although I kind of forced you to be reborn as a stick, I gave you 2 bonuses so you can say that everything is even. The first one is the existence evolution system you're using. Pretty familiar, right? I somewhat copied the system from the game you played and tweaked it a little bit so you can have more fun with the possibilities. Hearing that the first bonus was the system, Oris couldn't help but feel proud that his guess was right. But wait, second bonus? As for the second bonus, it is a special skill that would definitely help you out. If you knew what it was, you'd definitely bow down in front of me and worship me, ha ha ha. Anyways, I'll let you find that out for yourself, and also, good luck. Since the second bonus was a skill, Oris decided to leave it for now. At the moment, what he wanted to know the most were his stats. Open the status screen. Oris shouted. Ding. As if he was playing the game, a small semi-transparent screen appeared in front of his field of vision. Oris, level 1/3, experience, 0/3 existence level, inanimate grade, C stats, toughness, 1 thickness, 1 density, 1 in used experience points, 0 in used genesis points, 0. Checking that everything on the screen was the same as starting out in the game, Oris couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. As for the stats and the other stuff, this heavenly body will explain it to you at another time. Open the skill screen. Oris shouted. Excitement was evident in his non-existent eyes as he was extremely curious as to what skill Kurahana gave him. Ding. Active skills, role, passive skills, soul perception eye, blessing of the reincarnation goddess. Oh, role is still here. That's nice. But what about soul perception eye and that other skill with the long name? Oris couldn't help but think hard as to what the 2 skills did. Identify, soul perception eye. Ding. Soul perception eye, level 1 out of 5, experience, 0 out of 10, a skill obtained by those who are gifted in the soul. This skill allows the user to sense everything in their surroundings within a set radius. Current radius, 5 meters. Ah. So that's why I can see now. It's all thanks to this. Oris checked that the current radius of this skill was at 5 meters and examined if it was true. After a few minutes of testing, he found out that everything within a 5-meter radius was vivid and extremely detailed. As for everything beyond that, only blurry images could be seen. And now, this long skill. Identify a blessing of the reincarnation goddess. Ding. As Aura started to read the skill details, he couldn't help but have the urge to hug Kurahana at this instant. Why? It's because of this. Blessing of the Reincarnation Goddess, level max, experience, max with the Goddess of Reincarnation as your guide. Your memories in your past life have not been tampered by the Goddess but instead reinforced, allowing you to recall every single memory from that life. It also allows you to gain 50% more experience from everything you do thanks to your memories. Chapter 3. Oh, my God. This passive skill is definitely fitting of the name. Horus couldn't help but feel exhilarated whenever he sees the effects the passive skill gives him. A 50% boost to experience, not to mention every type of experience from levels to skills. And also to think that my memories weren't wiped because of this skill, I really can't help but thank her a lot. Being surprised by the effects of the two passive skills, Horus had the idea of checking the only active skill he had, which was roll. Since the two passive skills have such godly effects, then wouldn't Kurahana change the roll skill as well? Let's see if that's the case. Identify, roll. Ding. Roll, level 1/3, experience, 0/3 the basic movement for twigs and sticks of all sizes and shapes. An intangible energy exists everywhere, more commonly known as wind. Harnessing the energy from the wind, the stick can move forward at a constant rate. Rate of movement, 1 meter per hour. Horus couldn't help but laugh bitterly. It seemed that he got his hopes up for no reason. Well, it does make sense though. Why would she tamper with the roll skill if I already have two skills that would probably make a lot of players hate me if it was in-game? After calming himself down, he then wondered how much HP he currently had. When he looked at his status screen a while ago, he couldn't see his current HP amount. Show my HP bar, Horus commanded. Ding. The option has been enabled. After the voice that came from the system finished speaking, two numbers could be seen floating above Horus' body, separated by a line, 1/1 huh? Horus felt that this amount of HP was normal for someone at his current level. Anyways, once I level up, I'll gain more HP anyway, so why bother thinking how much HP I currently have? Horus' eyes gleamed as he could still vividly remember the godly passive skill. Anyways, let's not make the skill a waste and use it properly. Open up the map. Ding. A map of considerable size appeared in front of Horus' field of vision, allowing Horus to look at everything that surrounded within a 1-kilometer radius. Although he already figured out that he was reborn in the world of Iridinia and knew every place like the back of his hand, he still wanted to make sure just in case this current world was different from the game. And for some reason, there was only a deviation in terms of distance. Horus had his eyes on a special place he went to at the start of the game back then, and there was a distance of 500 meters between them back then. But now, that distance has been increased to 750 meters. Set a marker towards the place, Horus commanded. Ding. Marker has been placed. Forming path. After a while, a large blue triangle could be seen hovering above Horus' body. Horus could also sense a blue path that led to the place that he wanted to go to. It was an incredibly surreal experience for him. Let's not waste any more time. Wait. What time is it? Horus asked. Ding. Current time, day 1, 8:12 and 32 seconds AM HM. I've only wasted a few minutes on checking my current abilities. Anyways, roll, dot. After muttering the skill name, a faint green energy started to envelop Horus' body in a way that propelled him forward. He could feel that he could change the direction of his movement, but with the blue path in front of him leading the way, he saw that there was no need to change it. If I factor in everything that will happen to me along the way, it would take me around a day or two to reach that place. At this moment, Horus' eyes gleamed. But I have that skill, so it'll only take me a day at most. Onward to that place that I can't say because I feel like someone will explain it later on. Whoosh. Although a whoosh sound could be heard, Horus was moving at a pace that could be compared to the speed of a snail's movement, but he endured it since he would speed up soon enough. Ha ha. This is gonna take a while, Oris couldn't help but say. As Oris was moving towards the place at an excruciatingly slow pace, *Vsauce music plays. Hey, heavenly body here. What are stats? Haha, I told you that I'd be explaining stats and the other things sooner or later, so here I am. Anyways, there are 3 stats to take note of: toughness, thickness, and density. Toughness is equivalent to the defense stat in MMORPGs, thickness is equivalent to the vitality stat in MMORPGs, and density is equivalent to the attack stat in MMORPGs. And that's all pretty much. No wait, there's something else. Although these 3 stats fulfill their roles, they still have hidden connections with one another. I don't know how they're connected, but it exists. Also, the stats that our Oris has are only the 3 basic stats that every player has in ISE. Once he evolves to a certain point and reaches a certain existence level, he could obtain more stats like intelligence, spirit, element affinity, and so on. Now let's move on to the other stuff, specifically existence level and grades. At this point in time, you might be bored already after reading this heavenly body's long explanation, but bear with me a little bit more. Existence levels are basically a measurement on the sentience and power of a certain species. So far, you only need to know of 2 existence levels: inanimate, which is Oris' current existence level, and animate, the existence level after inanimate. They're self-explanatory, so I won't explain any further. As for grades, you know how some species are stronger than other species? That's because of grades. Although a lot of species are at the same existence level, when their grades are taken into consideration, some can do more than others. Anyways, there are only 5 grades to take note of: C, B, A, S, and X from lowest to highest respectively. These grades affect not only existence levels, but also skills as well, although I'll delve deeper into that part later on. Anyways, I have to get going now. Something special is going to happen to Oris soon. Swoop 2 hours have passed since Oris enabled the roll skill. Oris looked at the triangle on top of his stick body and looked at the number above it. 748. It has already been 2 hours and I've only moved 2 meters. This is definitely going to take a while. Ding. At this moment, Oris was surprised. Shouldn't that notification sound come up 1 hour later, he thought. But then he remembered that specific skill and then smiled. Roll has leveled up. Chapter 4, Roll has leveled up. Hearing that announcement made Oris' mouth curve from both ends. Although it was just an increase of 2 meters per hour per level up, to Oris, it was progress. Nonetheless, he was already getting sick of the sight, but since he had to continue moving forward, he just dozed off as he constantly rolled towards the place he set a marker on. Now, let me ask you this question. What place did Oris put a marker on wherein he still has 748 meters left to trek and is one of Oris' main objectives in order to become fast? Well, of course, this heavenly body here shall answer that question while answering another question. The latter question shall be saved for later. Anyways, Oris is heading to a place that every player in ISE always heads to first. If you're not a gamer, you wouldn't guess this, but it's a grinding spot. A grinding spot allows players to do speed leveling in order for them to evolve to higher grades and existence levels. No wait. I'm sure you've probably guessed it's a grinding spot since almost every person that stumbled upon this novel is for sure a gamer. Anyways, for the gamers, you can skip to nowhere. For the people who don't play MMORPGs, I explained grinding spots. Anyways, normally, grinding levels up at a certain spot early game is a big no-no since you wouldn't get used to your newfound strength. But in ISE, speed leveling is basically the way to progress. Although playing as a stick is interesting, players evolve into higher grades so they become less and less stick while obtaining more skills. Do you understand? Now Oris here is heading towards the closest grinding spot that could be traversed from the Forest of Beginnings. What is its name? The Lesser Experience Haven. Although it's self-explanatory, for those who are new to the game, and of course this novel as well, this place is filled with enemies, specifically twigs and sticks. That's all for the place Oris is heading towards. Now this heavenly body shall now answer the other question. What am I? Specifically, what are heavenly bodies? Oh wait, I forgot to play the special music. Let me try that again. Vsauce music plays what are heavenly bodies. Although there is no concrete evidence on scientific basis that heavenly bodies exist, we heavenly bodies are a manifestation of the Creator's imagination in order to act as an overseer for an entity. Although I'm not given a name by the Creator, I usually call myself Hebo. Also, even though heavenly bodies are made by the Creator to act as overseers, heavenly bodies are made to fulfill different purposes. Defense, offense, support, reconnaissance, pleasure, everything could be done by heavenly bodies. Now, there is also another type of heavenly bodies that aren't made by the Creator himself. These are called artificers, artifacts when it's just a single one. These artificers are made by the gods the Creator made to rule over the eternal plane being the universe. Well, now that I think about it, isn't it weird that Kurahana didn't make an artifact for Horus? And for some reason, I became the overseer for Horus? The Creator is definitely weird, but he has his reasons. What to do? How can I stall time while Horus is still rolling? Ding. I received a message from the Creator himself. Let me read it out for you. For those that are reading this novel, hello. I am the Creator. This novel is actually some sort of a mirror of the eternal plane I created, and I'm quite bored, so I'm currently writing this. As for spoilers, do you want some? Nah. I guess you won't need it. And that's all. Wait, there's more. Anyways, I wanted to pull an April Fool's joke on everyone that's reading this by turning all-star into binary, but then I thought, I'm too lazy to do that. So here I am, writing this letter to give to Hebo while you guys are waiting for something interesting to happen. Anyways, that's all from me. You might hear from me sooner or later, but it'll mostly be later than sooner. Asterisk poof. Asterisk, and just like that, the Creator's letter disappeared. Ding. Ah, finally. Horus made a bit more progress after I rambled for a while. 4 hours have passed since Roll has leveled up. The place Horus wanted to go to is still far from his reach, with 736 meters left between them. Even so, there was a bit of change in Horus' surroundings, although he didn't notice that. The thing he did notice was, ding. Roll has leveled up. Roll has reached the max level. Roll has met the requirements and is now ready to evolve. Ah. Horus heard the notification sound and made a short gasp of surprise before going back to normal. Since his Roll skill was now at max level, it was quite obvious that Horus would evolve it. But before he did so, if I remember correctly, the Roll skill was a C-grade skill, right? Horus tried to recall the thoughts of every single skill he had encountered before confirming that that was the case. Since Roll was the most basic skill a player could have, that meant that it would start off as a C-grade skill, the lowest grade for a skill possible. But once one were to max it out and evolve it, it could allow the player to move exponentially faster than before and even allow the player to do amazing things like teleport or fly. But he was still far off from evolving Roll into that sort of skill, so he commanded, evolve Roll. Although Roll would only become faster and not allow his body to fly, it was better than nothing. Ding. Please choose the skill that Roll would evolve into, Flash, Roll Plus. From the two options given to Horus, he was sure that he was going to pick Roll Plus, since it would eventually turn into the great Hover skill. But for some reason, he felt an urge to check the skills one by one to see if Kurahana tampered it. Identify, Flash. Ding. Flash, level 1/5, experience, 0 out of 5, an upgraded version of Roll, focused on traversing short distances at short times. Instead of allowing the wind to propel the stick forward, the stick instead stores the wind within it and explodes it into one go, propel the stick at a speed incomparable to before. Distance traversed, 20 meters cooldown, 2 hours. No difference at all, Horus said. He then checked the Roll Plus skill. Ding. Roll Plus, level 1/5, experience, 0 out of 5, an upgraded version of the Roll Plus skill focused on staying true to the original. With the stick's mastery, the stick can harness more of the wind to propel it faster. Rate of movement, 10 meters per hour. Although the distance traversed by both skills are the same in the same time frame, I'd really pick Roll Plus instead of Flash, since I hate staying in one place for a long time. Making his mind up, Oris confirmed his choice of evolving Roll into Roll Plus and waited for the notification sound. Ding! Roll has been evolved to Roll Plus. Well, that's one step further in the journey to becoming God tier again, Oris sighed. Afterwards, he activated the Roll Plus skill, continuing to head towards the Lesser Experience Haven. Chapter 5. Although the Lesser Experience Haven was still far away from Oris, he would usually this time where he was rolling towards a place to think about possible plans in the future or possible evolutions he could obtain. Since he had a lot of time on his hands now that he was reincarnated as a stick and had to work from the ground up, why not use it for some time to imagine? At the current rate I'm moving, it would take 4 hours for Roll Plus to level up, then 7 hours, then 10 hours, then 14 hours. Oris started to calculate the amount of time it would take for him to reach the maximum level of Roll Plus, and it definitely broke his belief that he would be able to reach the Lesser Experience Haven within a day. It seems I've overestimated the passive skill. Blessing of the Reincarnation Goddess. It was truly a passive skill fitting of the name. It allowed to recall all of his memories from his previous life and apply them in his current life. Not only that, but it also increased Oris' experience gain in everything by 50%. How could he not overestimate it? Anyways, he didn't think too much further and spent his time looking around his surroundings since at his current speed, it would now constantly change unlike before the skill evolution. Hello there, Heavenly Body Hebo here. It seems that the Creator wants me to go back to his dimension and leave Oris be. I don't know why he wants to do this, but I saw a glimpse of another body beside him that looked exactly like me. Is the Creator possibly thinking of replacing me Hebo with another heavenly body? Man, this is definitely unexpected. I want to witness Oris' growth to becoming a. It seems I've spoken too much. Wait, the heavenly body is moving somewhere else? The Creator didn't assign him to Oris? Phew, that's a relief. But seriously though, why did he recall me? Hebo. You're back. The Creator looked at me and gave a warm smile. It feels like bliss whenever I look at the Creator's face. But I still want to know why he wanted me to go back. Why did you call me back, Creator? Didn't you tell me to look over Oris? I asked. The Creator looked at me for a bit before writing a few words on the thick book he was holding. I assigned someone else with more power to look over Oris. And I chose an ironic person to do that. The Creator smiled as he laughed in a wicked manner. Now this, I feel like something wrong is gonna happen. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a chilly breeze blew through Kurahana's space. It was weird though since the space was fully sealed, not letting any wind pass through. Kurahana couldn't help but shiver as a thought suddenly flashed in her mind. She formed a chair out of the white material that made the walls of her space and sat on it as a crystal orb appeared in front of her. She then channeled her deity energy into the orb as a live image formed within her orb. The image formed was of a stick that was moving as if it was one with the wind. Indeed, Kurahana was looking at Oris. Oh? He has evolved the Roll Plus skill already? Well, that's to be expected. Kurahana gave a light smile. With the blessing I gave to him, he would progress faster and faster. At this point in time, Kurahana couldn't help but give an evil laugh. Once he matures to a certain point, ha, he shall become the catalyst for my transcended deity weapon. The archaic soul wood. He shall become that wood. 4 hours have passed since Oris evolved Roll into Roll Plus. Ding! Roll Plus has leveled up. At this point in time, Oris' rate of movement has been increased by 5 meters per hour, thus bringing the total to 15 meters per hour. If one could notice, evolving skills would also lead to greater increases between levels. Just like how Roll gave an increase of 2 meters per hour per level while Roll Plus gave an increase of 5 meters per hour per level. Oris looked at the triangle at the top of his body and saw that there was a definite change now. There was only 696 meters left between him and the Lesser Experience Haven. Using math, he deduced that the distance between him and the Lesser Experience Haven would be reduced by 100 or so meters once the skill leveled up again. Move onward. Towards the lesser experience haven. Oris tried to motivate himself, only to fail in the process. 7 hours have passed. In total, it has already been 15 hours ever since Oris was reborn as a stick. Ding. Roll Plus has leveled up. Now, Oris was halfway from maxing the Roll Plus skill and evolving it into a higher grade of skill. He then checked the triangle on top of his body and was surprised that his deduction was correct. There was only a distance of 591 meters between him and the lesser experience haven left. For some reason, Oris couldn't help but sigh. Although I've gotten used to waiting long times between level ups at the game, I just can't help but want my transcended skills back. As he pondered for a bit, Oris shook his non-existent head. Wait. Why limit myself to transcended skills if I can achieve divine skills in the future? With this, Oris gained a bit of motivation as he continued to roll towards the designated place. Mortal, transcendent, divine. These 3 tiers are always visible in everything. For skills, they have a lot of differences. Mortal skills are skills that almost every species can obtain. They range from a grade of C to X, same with the transcendent and divine skills. Roll is a good example of a mortal skill. These skills act as a foundation for the next tier of skills that are also known as transcendent skills. Transcendent skills, from the word itself, it transcends mortal limits, allowing mortals to do the impossible. The skill that Oris wants so much, Hover, is actually a transcendent skill. Sometimes transcendent skills can go beyond their limits and exert a force that is said to be only doable by deities. These skills are divine skills. Although divine skills are extremely strong, a lot of the strong people in Eridenia have at least one of those skills, saved as a trump card. 10 hours have passed. Ding. Roll Plus has leveled up. At this exact moment, Oris noticed that he has already been reborn for a day already. Although he only rolled for most of this time, he couldn't deny that he has already existed for a day. Looking at the triangle, he was surprised to see that the distance between him and the place was only 395 meters. Not wasting time, he continued to roll. 13 hours have passed. It was currently nighttime in the world of Eridenia. But for Oris, who had soul perception eye, he didn't care if it was night or day since he could still see clearly. At this moment though, Oris could see that the shadows of the place he wanted to go could now be seen. As he looked at the triangle on top of his body, only 70 meters remained between him and the place. He would usually use this chance to continue rolling, but he couldn't really do that at the moment. Why? Ding. Roll Plus has leveled up. Roll Plus has reached the max level. Roll Plus has met the requirements and is now ready to evolve. Chapter 6, Roll Plus has leveled up. Roll Plus has reached the max level. Roll Plus has met the requirements and is now ready to evolve. Now this I didn't expect, Oris said out of shock as he didn't deduce far enough to foresee this situation. In most cases, players would ignore this for now and head towards the grinding spot before evolving. But who was Oris? He was the great owner of the godly passive skill, Blessing of the Reincarnation Goddess. Every meter he passes would always lead to him gaining experience. Why would he just head straight towards the grinding spot? That would be a waste of his skill. If I remember correctly, this is the time where there's an even bigger jump in the effects of skills, Oris said. Although it goes without a saying, this next evolution is basically putting the skill at a level where there is only 2 grades left before it evolves into a true transcendent skill. Evolve, Roll Plus. Oris didn't dare to delay it any further and commanded the existence evolution system. Ding. Please choose the skill that, Roll Plus, would evolve into Roll Plus Plus, Breeze Burst. What should I choose? If it was the usual Oris, he would pick Roll Plus Plus, since it would eventually lead him to being able to fly using the Hover skill. But after looking at the second skill, he hesitated. Man. This skill sounds so cool. Indeed. Oris hesitated just because the latter sounded cooler than the former. I should think it from a logical perspective though. What would give me bigger benefits? Identify, Breeze Burst. Ding. Breeze Burst, level 1 out of 10, experience, 0 out of 10, an upgraded version of the Roll Plus skill. With the stick's massively increased affinity and control with the wind, the stick can store wind energy within its body while constantly moving, allowing for a backup plan when cornered. Rate of movement, 30 meters per hour burst distance, 30 meters burst cooldown, 2 hours. Seeing the rate of movement on the Breeze Burst skill somewhat disappointed him, but seeing that he can move a considerable distance in a short amount of time, that's when he truly hesitated. If I pick this skill, that would basically mean that I would have a last resort skill when I'm cornered, or as thought of it from a beneficial perspective. But all of a sudden, a pessimistic idea entered his mind. Would I activate the skill, only for me to burst a certain distance and move constantly afterwards, not allowing me to save the burst for dangerous situations? At this moment, Oris shuddered at the thought. He then looked at the skill he chose back then and the skill he was most familiar with, Roll Plus Plus. Ding! Roll Plus Plus, level 1 out of 10, experience, 0 out of 10, an upgraded version of the Roll Plus skill. It's obvious that the speed of movement is higher compared to the previous version thanks to an additional plus sign on the end. With the stick's massively increased affinity with the wind, the stick can propel itself at high speed, although there would be a limit thanks to the air resistance it receives. Who knows? Once it evolves, maybe it gains a new supporting skill. Rate of movement, 50 meters per hour. This. Oris' eyes widened. Although he knew the capabilities of the Roll Plus Plus skill all too well, there was something that caught his eye. There were a few sentences that said something about the Roll Plus Plus skill possibly gaining a new supporting skill once it evolves, and of course Oris knew what he had to do. I choose Roll Plus Plus, Oris said. In the game, Roll Plus Plus was a skill that was rarely chosen by people since it only offered one mode of movement, which is rolling. Unlike Breeze Burst, which offered 2 modes of movement, Roll Plus Plus paled in comparison. But ever since he was reborn, this was the first time he found a change in the skill, even if it was just flavor text. He had no choice but to pick it, to be honest. After confirming his choice once more, Oris then heard a notification sound. Ding! Roll Plus has been evolved to Roll Plus Plus. After making sure that the Roll Plus Plus skill was there, he continued to roll, shortening the 70-meter gap to 0 after a few hours. The Lesser Experience Haven. A grinding spot made for those in the C-grade and B-grade inanimate level. Back then, it was a battlefield of who could hunt which enemy first, as everyone wanted to grow faster than others. But for Oris, who was reborn into the same world without any other players, it was truly befitting of the word haven. The Lesser Experience Haven spanned over 5 kilometers in radius, being split into 2 areas meant for the 2 grades. The outer area, which is comprised of the outer 3 kilometers, is meant for those at the C-grade inanimate level. The inner area, comprised of the remaining 2 kilometers, is meant for those at the B-grade inanimate level. Although there are times that C-grade inanimates challenge the inner area, most of the time it would end up in defeat and they would remove the thought of going back there before they evolve. Oris only headed a few hundred meters in because that was enough for his current level. The inner portion of the outer area sometimes had scary enemies that boasted high attack or high HP, and he didn't want to face them at his current pitiful state. HM. Where's my experience? Oris hummed as he continued to roll, searching for the best enemy to kill. Within the outer portion of the outer area, there exists 2 types of enemies, twigs and sticks. Sticks boasted HP that was as high as a level 1 C grade, while twigs had HP that was only a fifth of a level 1 C grade. Even though that was the case, twigs boasted an attack power that was higher compared to a level 1 C grade, while sticks boasted an attack power around half of a level 1 C grade. Now the question is, what enemy is Oris searching for? That's right, a twig. Although twigs boasted higher attack power, level 1 C grades can still withstand a few of the twig's attack before dying, perhaps even leveling up before dying. After a few more hours of searching, he found what he was looking for. Identify. Ding. Twig, level 1, HP, 0.2/0.2. Oris looked at his HP bar that was higher than the twig and rolled towards the twig. After a few minutes of rolling, Oris positioned himself perpendicular to the twig, as this would allow him to utilize most of his density in one go, increasing his chances of doing a critical hit. This was experience he built up in his previous life, and he was now going to use it. Roll ++. Whoosh. Wait, whoosh. The speed at which Oris rolled over twig was slow. Although it was multiple times faster than a snail, it was lacking when compared to a human that could move around 5 meters in a second. To be honest, he could only move at a speed close to 1 meter a minute as of now, but that would change soon enough. After rolling over the short body of the twig, a notification sound popped up which shocked him. Ding. Critical hit. Oris has dealt 0.2 HP damage to twig. Experience +3. Congratulations. Oris has leveled up. Chapter 7a. Oris definitely didn't expect his first attack to be a critical hit. In his previous life, he considered himself as a person with extremely bad luck. But for some reason, when he was reborn as a stick, the first attack he dealt was actually a critical. Have the gods finally taken pity on him? It's quite an overstatement to say that the gods have finally pitied Oris and given him good luck, since he would eventually encounter situations that don't favor him, but it does seem that his luck is turning for the better. Well, now that I'm level 2 and I'm nearing the max level for this grade, I should head forward and enter the inner portion of the outer area, Oris decided, since he would evolve soon enough once he kills enough twigs. But before that, open the status screen. Ding. Oris, level 2/3, experience, 0/5 existence level, inanimate grade, C, HP, 2/2 stats, toughness, 2, thickness, 2, density, 2 unused experience points, 0 unused genesis points, 0. Ever since he enabled the option of seeing his HP bar that would usually hover over his body, the option of being able to see his HP bar from his status screen was enabled as well. HM. From leveling up, I can say that my abilities have doubled, Oris said to himself. It was quite true though, since his stats were only at 1 at level 1. He then checked the amount of experience he needed, as he said, I need 5 experience points before I max it out. As he said this, he noticed something missing below the experience bar. Why can't I see my species? Of course, if dogs and cats have their breeds, sticks would also have their own distinct characteristics as well. Knowing the enemy's species would allow you to attack more efficiently, and knowing your own species would allow you to improve in a way that benefits your own species. Oris then commanded, enable the option of seeing my species. Ding. The option has been enabled. Oris' current species is stick. Hearing the voice that came from the system, he couldn't help but chuckle. As expected, my starting species is the same as starting out in ISE. A stick. Well, let's not waste any more time. Oris placed the thought at the back of his head and activate the Roll ++ skill, heading towards the inner portion of the outer area. Within the dimension Kurahana resided, one could see that Kurahana was eagerly watching a stick roll through a crystal orb. Although this would normally bore people, for Kurahana, who had a near infinite lifespan, it was better than doing nothing. If you think about it though, who wouldn't want to see their catalyst become stronger so it can create a better weapon? In just 2 days, you're already close to evolving? This is definitely great. Kurahana let out a laugh that was unbefitting of her appearance. At first glance, everyone would think of her as a pure and innocent girl, but sadly she had a bipolar personality that would even merge together at times. Ring. All of a sudden, a ringing sound could be heard coming from the orb. Kurahana, who was watching Oris, frowned as she looked at the person who called her. Yes, the reason for the ringing sound was that she received a call. She changed the image on the orb from Oris into another person Kurahana knew. This person was a god just like her, but he governed another part of the universe, specifically the underworld. Although this person was ruler of the underworld, he was devilishly handsome to the point that many goddesses would confess to him, only to be rejected by the cold aura he emitted. This god was none other than the god of the underworld, Hadouken. Kurahana looked at Hadouken with a smiling face, as she was used to looking at handsome people. How are you, Hadouken? Hadouken opened his mouth as a cold yet calm voice sounded out. I'm fine, thank you. The underworld is currently stable at the moment and I'm planning to improve its power soon enough. How about you, Kurahana? Are the 6 paths having any issues? Kurohana shook her head as she maintained her smile. Not at all. In fact, it's becoming better since I've assigned personnel for each path. Anyways, if you strengthen the underworld, my 6 paths would also benefit from it, you know? Even though they were gods who tend to stay out of the mortals' issues, they still wanted to grow stronger and possibly reach the level of strength that the Creator, the God of everything, wielded. Since that was the case, they would strengthen the things they governed and limit the access of the mortals from the divine portions of the things they governed. At this moment, Kurohana let out a small snigger as she said, "You do know you didn't come here for that, right?" Hadouken looked at her and couldn't help but let out a rare smile. "You're right. Let me get straight to the point. Teach me how to craft a primordial weapon." 17 hours have passed since Horus activated Roll++. Ding. Ding. Roll++ has leveled up. Roll++ has leveled up. Indeed. Through these past 17 hours, Horus traversed a distance that allowed him to level up Roll++ twice. And considering the fact that each level up increased the rate of movement of Roll++ by 10 meters per hour, Horus is now moving at a speed that slightly exceeded the rate of 1 meter per minute. After a while, Horus stopped in his tracks and saw 2 twigs that were coincidentally beside each other, making him smile. They shall be my targets then. Horus then rolled towards the 2 twigs and positioned himself perpendicular to the twigs just like before. He was taking his chances on whether he could achieve a critical hit again. Attack! Horus shouted inwardly as he rolled over the 2 twigs. Although the situation he imagined looked great in his mind, in actuality, it was slow as usual. Well, it was faster than before, but still slow. Ding! Horus has dealt 0.2 HP to Twig 1. Horus has dealt 0.2 HP to Twig 2. Twig 1 and Twig 2 have been killed. Experience +6. Horus had a solemn expression once he saw this. It turns out that he didn't need to do a critical hit anymore since his attack stat could now one-shot the twigs to death. As he continued to read through the notifications, he knew his time has finally come. Congratulations! Horus has leveled up. Horus has reached the max level. Horus has met the needed requirements and is now ready to evolve. Chapter 8 finally. Horus has been rolling for around 2 days and killed 3 enemies just so he can finally start the true journey to becoming a god-tier existence. Now, why does the true journey start at becoming a B-grade inanimate? The reason behind it is that it is the evolution that sets your class. You could be a stick warrior, a stick ranger, or a stick illusionist. Those are the 3 main paths you can choose, and it just expands from there. Multiple players have given up midway through their journey to becoming a B-grade inanimate because to them, it would just be a cycle of roll, kill, and repeat. But once they knew that the B-grade inanimate species had more skills than C-grade inanimates, they would have the urge to come back, but they wouldn't have the chance to catch up anymore. Even though a grade seemed like a small difference to every other species, for sticks, it's what truly sets them apart from other sticks. Plus the diversity doesn't end there since they can evolve even further into other types. Horus looked at his surroundings and checked if there were any enemies nearby. Seeing that there were a few twigs and sticks that could possibly roll and attack him, Horus rolled back to the outer portion of the outer area at a speed incomparable to before. It still took him 14 hours though. Ding! Roll++ has leveled up. Horus ignored this notification and calmed himself down. Since this would be his first evolution, the choice he would make would affect him in the long run. He has to make it count. Evolve, he commanded. Ding! Horus has met all of the requirements needed to evolve. Ding! Horus has met special requirements needed to evolve into special species. Hearing the second statement, Horus' eyes widened. Special species. I can't believe I can evolve into a special species right off the bat. Special species. From the name alone, these species are extremely special obviously. Why? That's because these species are just like normal species, but with more effects like more active skills or passive skills. If one were to compare it to a normal MMORPG, it would be akin to a hidden class. If the warrior was a normal class, then the berserker and guardian class are hidden warrior class. The same thing applies for special species. Ding. Please choose the species that Oris will evolve into: Mahogany Branch, Sakura Branch, Walnut Branch, Wind Mahogany Branch, Special, Wind Sakura Branch, Special, Wind Walnut Branch, Special. Seeing the amount of species Oris could choose made him somewhat overwhelmed. But looking closely, it was pretty much the same choices for normal players other than the wind-type species. Also, people might not usually notice this, but a stick will now be called a branch once it evolves, since it grows in size once it evolves. What does a branch evolve to afterwards? Possibly a branch formosus or a sapling, but that's in the future. If I remember correctly, the Mahogany Branch is the warrior class, the Sakura Branch is the illusionist class, and the Walnut Branch is the ranger class, Oris said as he opened the screen for the Mahogany Branch. It's been a while since I played as a small branch, so the memories are kinda hazy. Ding. Mahogany Branch, existence level, inanimate grade, B. The stick has decided to surpass its limits and become stronger, focusing on defense and close-range combat. The stick that evolves to this type of species are destined to become guardians or deadly close-range attackers. The active skill, Charge, is obtained. The passive skill, Tenacity, is obtained. The passive skill, SP Storage, is obtained. Forgot about the SP Storage skill. Oris memories were revived after seeing the info regarding the Mahogany Branch. Every species of the B-grade inanimate level gain a universal passive skill, which is SP Storage. This shall be explained later. Charge is a skill that is self-explanatory, while Tenacity is a passive skill that increases defense and reduces damage once the HP reaches a certain point, Oris said to himself as he was rummaging through his memories. He played as a Mahogany Branch in his previous life, and that's why he can still remember it. Identify, Sakura Branch. Ding. Sakura Branch, existence level, inanimate grade, B. The stick has decided to surpass its limits and become stronger, focusing on illusions and deception. The stick that evolves to this type of species are destined to become masters of stealth, masters of illusions, or masters of buffs and curses. The active skill, Confusion Pollen, is obtained. The passive skill, Sakura Bloom, is obtained. The passive skill, SP Storage, is obtained. According to my memories, the Confusion Pollen skill confuses enemies and possibly makes them attack themselves. The Sakura Bloom skill is basically the main method on how players can cast illusions. The more flowers on the branch, the more powerful the illusion is, Oris muttered. Anyways, a friend of mine played this and became a God-tier assassin, but it's lacking something, Oris said to himself as he identified the last normal species in his choices, Walnut Branch. Ding. Walnut Branch, existence level, inanimate grade B. The stick has decided to surpass its limits and become stronger. The stick that evolves to this type of species is destined to become a ranger able to deal with multiple enemies, or a sage that is able to conjure magic spells that could shake the earth and tear the heavens asunder. The active skill, Nut Shot, is obtained. The passive skill, Fruit Creation, is obtained. The passive skill, SP Storage, is obtained. Reading the flavor text alone, Oris' interest was piqued. Becoming a ranger or a mage that can conjure spells? At this point, his decision was set. He would become a Walnut Branch. Well, since I've decided my species, let's see the special variation of the species. Identify, Wind Walnut Branch. Ding. Wind Walnut Branch, special, existence level, inanimate grade, B. The stick has decided to surpass its limits and become stronger. Unknowingly, the stick has improved its movement skills so well that it has gained the recognition of the wind that surrounds it. The stick that evolves to this type of species is destined to become a ranger or a mage that would go down in legends, but could possibly exceed that. The active skill, Nut Shot, is obtained. The passive skill, Fruit Creation, is obtained. The passive skill, SP Storage, is obtained. The special passive skill, Wind Affinity, is obtained. Although Oris wanted to check each and every skills of the Wind Walnut Branch, right now, he wanted to become a God-tier existence as fast as possible, so he'll just check later. I've chosen Evolve to Wind Walnut Branch. Afterwards, the system asked the same question as a confirmation, to which Oris readily agreed. All of a sudden, Oris felt like he wanted to go to sleep until he actually did go to sleep. As to why this happened, it had something to do with the system. A few minutes later, a notification sound could be heard although Oris was unconscious. Ding! Oris Stick has evolved to Oris Wind Walnut Branch. Chapter 9 gasped. Oris woke up as he took in a deep breath. He didn't expect that he would fall unconscious whenever he evolved. Fortunately, nothing happened to him while he was unconscious, but it still gave him a feeling that he was vulnerable. He then checked his surroundings and saw that it was already dark, not that it made a difference for him. System, what time is it? Oris asked. Ding. Current time, day 3, 9:15 and 32 seconds p.m. Calculating the time that passed while he was unconscious, it took 6 hours to evolve into his current form. He then started to examine his body, which at first glance was definitely bigger than before. The color of his bark was now a slight ash gray, as some green shoots could be seen growing out of Oris' body. He didn't panic at all after seeing it, as he was sure that it had something to do with his skills. Open the status screen, he commanded, as he wanted to know what changes happened to his stats and stuff. Ding. Oris, level 1/5, experience, 0 out of 10 species, Wind Walnut Branch, special, existence level, inanimate grade, B, HP, 5/5 stats, toughness, 5, thickness, 5, shell hardness, 5 synchronization rate, 20% in used experience points, 1 in used genesis points, 0. At first glance, Oris noticed a lot of things. The first of which was his current species that could be seen under the experience bar. Afterwards, he checked his HP that has basically doubled compared to his previous health. As he continued to look at his status screen, he then asked the system, what's shell hardness? Ding. Shell hardness is equivalent to the density stat before evolution. It affects the attack power of the fruit created with the fruit creation skill. So it's just my attack stat, but transferred to another place. Oris easily understood what the system meant. As for the fruit creation skill, he would check it later, as another thing caught his eye. Synchronization rate? That hasn't been there before, Oris muttered. What is it? Ding. Synchronization rate refers to the level of connection of the soul to the body. For other species, it is the level of intelligence a soul has. For a species at the animate level, they would have a synchronization rate of 100%. So that's what it does, Oris nodded. He tried to move his body with the Roll++ skill and saw that it responded faster when compared to before. Since this synchronization rate increases with every evolution, I think I might have the possibility of wielding a weapon, increasing my leveling speed. Oris imagined himself rolling through a wave of enemies as a floating weapon hovered beside him as he killed each of them one by one, leveling up at a preposterous speed. He then closed his status screen as he said, time to check on my weight. System, enable the option of showing my SP bar, Oris commanded. He almost forgot about the universal passive skill every stick would get once they reached the B grade inanimate level, SP storage. Now what is SP storage? It's the equivalent of MP in common MMORPGs, but in this case, instead of the intelligence and wisdom stat affecting the amount of MP a player can hold and the speed at which MP regenerates for ISE, it was instead based on the skill SP storage. Without this skill, B-grade inanimates would not be much different from their C-grade counterparts. It is the reason why B-grade inanimates say that the true journey begins when you evolve to B-grade. Ding. Option has been enabled. Not long after the voice finished speaking, 2 numbers separated by a line could be seen under the HP bar hovering over his body, 2 halves. Definitely how I expected it to be, Oris nodded as he opened the skill screen. Ding. Active skills, Roll++, Nut Shot, Passive skills, SP storage, Wind affinity, Fruit creation, Soul perception eye, Blessing of the Reincarnation Goddess. Oris looked at his skill screen as he pondered. He felt like there was something in the screen, specifically numbers. Oris realized. System, enable the option of allowing me to see the skill levels. Ding. Option has been enabled. Now that he has enabled the option, his current skill screen now looked like this. Active skills, roll LV.5/10, nutshot LV.1/3, passive skills, SP storage LV.1/3, wind affinity LV.1/3, fruit creation level 1/3, soul perception ILV.1/5, blessing of the reincarnation goddess LV.max. Now contented with him seeing each skill have their levels beside it, he then commanded, identify, nutshot, SP storage, fruit creation, and wind affinity. Ding. 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 3 screens appeared in front of Aura's field of vision as he looked at each screen one by one. I should enable the option of seeing the skill grades as well, Aura remembered as he was looking at the screen. I'll just do it later. Nutshot, level 1/3, experience, 0/3. A walnut branch can utilize their fruit as projectile weapons that can deal damage to enemies. Once the fruit collides with the enemy, it shatters into pieces, dealing damage. The damage is reliant on the shell hardness stat of the stick. Cost, 1 SP cooldown, 5 seconds. SP storage, level 1/3, experience, 0/3. An omnipresent energy found in the world of Iridinia. It allows sticks to do things that are normally impossible for them. Commonly found in a gaseous form within a vessel formed in the stick, it holds infinite possibilities. Maximum SP capacity, 2 SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute. Wind affinity, level 1/3, experience, 0/3. With enough experience, the stick can sense the wind in the surroundings, utilizing it in many ways possible. This skill boosts the damage and projectile speed of attacks by 1%. Fruit creation, level 1/3, experience, 0/3. An innate skill found on all sticks and branches related to the walnut race. This allows branches and sticks to form fruits that could either be used as storage for SP or bullets for attacking. Maximum amount of fruit, 3 maximum SP capacity per walnut, 1 SP. Oris looked at this and couldn't help but let out a smile at the skills he currently owned. It was nowhere near compared to the skills of a mahogany branch that he played in his previous life. Now that he was going to be a ranger or possibly a mage, the first he had to figure out was to become efficient with his SP. Now then, Oris asked himself, what ratio should I use for the amount of SP storage to the amount of bullets? Chapter 10. Since the fruit creation skill allows me to create 3 nuts, I should go with 2 on SP storage and 1 as a bullet for now. After pondering for a bit, Oris finally settled on a ratio that seemed like it would help him. Activating the fruit creation skill, 3 small nuts suddenly sprouted from Oris' body. 2 of these nuts were a pale green in color, while the other one was similar to the color of Oris' body, ash gray. If I add in the 2 nuts I set for SP storage, that means I now have 4 SP to use. Oris then started to think far ahead. If the fruit creation skill or the SP storage skill levels up, that would mean I would have more SP to use. If I have a lot of SP, I might unlock a new evolution. Oris couldn't help but snigger at the thought. Just like how evolving roll to roll ++ allowed him to access a special evolution, he had a feeling that having a lot of SP would allow him to access a more special evolution compared to his current species. Perhaps a rare evolution? While he was engrossed in his delusions, a notification sound popped up, bringing him back to reality. Ding! Fruit creation has leveled up. Well, that was fast, Oris couldn't help but say. He then opened the screen regarding the skill, checking the differences between the levels. Not long after, another nut sprouted from his body. This nut was also ash gray, just like the last nut from before. Okay. With 4 nuts, I think I'm set for now. Oris then opened up the map and set a marker for the outer portion of the inner area, which was 4 kilometers away. He didn't dare to enter the center of the lesser experience haven, since a scary enemy lived there. With the blue path leading his way and the triangle hovering on top of his body telling how much distance he left being manifested, he then activated roll ++ and started to, roll. As he rolled, he noticed that his rolling wasn't bumpy at all. He took a look at his body and saw that the nuts were inside his body, waiting to sprout once more when needed. Looking at this, Oris couldn't help but thank Kurahana for giving him the system. And with only an ellipsis separating two situations, 42 hours have unnoticeably passed. Along the journey, two notification sounds alerting Oris of the Roll++ skill leveling up occurred. At the moment, Oris stopped where he was, and all of a sudden, the 4 nuts he prepared before sprouted out, giving Oris a sense of security. He then looked around his surroundings and saw at first glance that the enemies he would face right now were not pushovers. A few meters away from him, a thick branch could be standing in place as the cold breeze blew through its bark. The thick branch didn't flinch at all from the cold, because it was a branch. Identify, Oris commanded. Ding. Lesser Mahogany Branch, Level 4, HP, 15/15. Gulp. Oris swallowed his saliva even though he didn't have any saliva to swallow. He looked at the HP of the branch in front of him and couldn't help but scratch his head figuratively. 15 HP. That's almost 8 times bigger when compared to the sticks in the outer area. Oris took a deep breath before realizing something. Wait a minute. Ain't I a wind walnut branch? A species specialized in attacking from far away? At this moment, Oris sniggered as he got closer to the enemy he identified. After the gap between them was shortened to 2 meters, Oris positioned his body perpendicular to the branch and then chanted a skill. Nut shot. Although it sounded wrong when heard for the first time, this skill was the first attack skill available for those of the walnut race. This skill is equivalent to the charge of the mahogany race and confusion pollen of the sakura race. At the moment, Oris thought that nut shot was an instantaneous attack skill like charge, but of course, with advantages come disadvantages. The 1 SP Oris used to activate the nut shot skill circulated in the place where SP is stored and then went through the xylem and phloem of his body before reaching one of the ash-gray nuts that were hanging from his body. Not long after, the ash-gray nut started to glow green, a normal glow that would come from using SP. It then started to hover as it broke off from the small branch it latched on and then shot itself towards the enemy Oris targeted. Bang! In an instant, the nut collided with the body of the enemy. The nut then exploded into multiple bit-sized pieces and dealt damage to the enemy. Ding! Oris then heard the notification sound and opened up the damage screen, only to be shocked by what he saw. Oris has dealt 5 HP damage to Lesser Mahogany Branch. After being dealt damage, the Lesser Mahogany Branch then started to roll around as if it had a soul of its own and tried to search for the one who did it. After a while, it gave up since it didn't find anything, going back to its original place. Oris couldn't help but snigger at the thought. Since those of the mahogany race don't have long-range attacks, they can't hit me while I can hit them. Although it takes me a while to activate my attack skill, it does deal a lot of damage in exchange. I wonder how much damage it'll deal once I evolve it. At this moment, Oris felt something happening in his body, so he checked it out. One of the nuts that were pale green in color had its SP sucked by the SP vessel in Oris' body, turning the nut into an ash-gray color. It was at this moment that Oris realized the ideal way to use his nuts. Make everything SP storage while I leave one nut empty. Oris' eyes gleamed at his fast thinking. Not long after, 3 nuts were now pale green in color while one of them was ash-gray in color. The cooldown has ended. Now. Nut shot. Bang! Once more, the sole ash-gray nut flew towards the Lesser Mahogany Branch and exploded into bits, dealing 5 HP damage just like before. Not long after, one of the pale green nuts turned ash-gray, giving Oris another bullet to use. But at this moment, a notification sound popped up which somewhat confused him. He then heard the voice from the system, and from there he understood. Ding! Fruit creation has leveled up. Fruit creation has reached the max level. Fruit creation has met the necessary requirements and is now ready to evolve. Chapter 11 HM. Well, this is a surprise, Oris muttered as he checked the remaining HP of the Lesser Mahogany Branch in front of him. After seeing that just one fight allowed him to already evolve one of his skills to a higher grade, he couldn't help but admire the passive skill he gained from Kurahana. Though it's not like incredibly strong where it breaks the balance of the world, it still lets me improve at a fast rate, Oris said. Well, let's finish this first before I evolve it. Nut shot. Bang! With one more ash-gray nut, The lesser mahogany branch that Oris targeted finally broke apart into two and died. Ding. Oris has dealt 5 HP damage to lesser mahogany branch. Experience plus 15. Congratulations. Oris has leveled up. Oris then closed his eyes and felt a weird sensation all over his body. All of the cells in his body started to condense towards the center as new cells were formed, making Oris' body denser than it was. He didn't know why this happened, but then realized something. Leveling up means that my stats increase, Oris deduced. Now that I have a faint connection with my body, does that mean that I can now feel every improvement happening in my body? Thinking about it, it sounded plausible. Oris placed it in the back of his head and decided to test his hypothesis later. But first, Oris was going to command something to the system, but a notification sound popped up. Ding. SP storage has leveled up. Ooh. I'm surprised it leveled up this fast. I just need one more level before I can evolve it, Oris chuckled as he said this to himself. Though it sounds weird that the ability of storing SP can be improved through skill leveling instead of stat improving, it's quite logical from the perspective of a stick. A stick inherently doesn't have any way of improvement other than the environment and skills it has. For SP storage, the repeated usage of SP allows it to gain experience and level up. Pushing the notification aside, Oris then focused on the matter at hand and commanded, Evolve, Fruit Creation. Ding. Please select the skill that, Fruit Creation, would evolve into, Condensed Fruit Creation, Piercing Fruit Creation, Regenerative Fruit Creation. Ooh. 3 choices, Oris said to himself. From the names alone, I feel like each and every one of them is a great upgrade compared to the previous skill. I should check what each skill can do before I really choose. Identify, Condensed Fruit Creation. Ding. Condensed Fruit Creation, Level 1/5, Experience, 0/5. An upgraded version of the Fruit Creation skill, focused on a balance of SP storage and damage. Once evolved to this skill, the amount of fruit able to produce would be reduced by half, but in turn, it would allow the fruits to hold twice as much SP and allow the fruits to deal twice the amount of damage. Maximum amount of fruit, 3 maximum SP capacity per walnut, 4 SP. Holy, that's a lot of SP per nut, Oris couldn't help but say. He checked the maximum amount of fruit he could produce and saw that it made sense since Fruit Creation at max level would allow him to make 5 fruits since each level increased the limit by 1. But, for SP per walnut. He then checked the skill screen for Fruit Creation and saw that each fruit could now hold 2 SP since it was maxed in level. After checking it, everything now made sense to Oris. If I evolved to this skill, I would basically hold double the amount of SP I can currently hold with a maxed Fruit Creation skill and even deal twice the damage than I used to do. If Oris said that he wasn't interested in this skill, he'd be lying. He then moved on to the next skill. Ding. Piercing Fruit Creation, Level 1/5, Experience, 0/5. An upgraded version of the Fruit Creation skill, focused on dealing extreme amounts of damage. Once evolved to this skill, every fruit formed will now deal twice the damage. In exchange for that, the amount of SP a fruit can hold has been halved. Nonetheless, the walnut stick can now produce a nut that can deal twice the doubled damage, effectively dealing 4 times the damage. Maximum amount of fruit, 5 maximum SP capacity per walnut, 1 SP. Oh. Oris' eyes gleamed. Dealing 4 times the damage with the same skill? If I chose this, I would be able to one-shot the lesser mahogany branch I fought a while ago and possibly one-shot stronger species as well. But after he realized something, he thought that he shouldn't pick this skill as an evolution. If I choose this skill, it would be harder for me to become a stick mage. Although one-shotting enemies is cool and stuff, nothing's cooler than conjuring spells. Ever since Oris evolved and knew that he had SP, he was aiming to get a lot of SP. Although he didn't know how much SP he wanted. 25? 50? 100? Let's move on. Identify, Regenerative Fruit Creation. Ding. Regenerative Fruit Creation, Level 1/5, Experience, 0/5. An upgraded version of the Fruit Creation skill, focused on everything related to SP. Once evolved to this skill, the fruits produced would be able to hold twice the amount of SP while still dealing the same amount of damage. In exchange, the walnut stick can produce a new type of fruit that could either regenerate HP or SP, which has its own limit. Maximum amount of fruits, 5 maximum amount of regenerative fruits, 1 maximum SP capacity per walnut, 4 SP. This is. Oris was left speechless after seeing the upgrade the skill brought. Although the nuts wouldn't deal as much damage when compared to the condensed or piercing variant, he would be able to hold twice the amount of SP just like the condensed variant. Not to mention, regenerative fruits that would allow him to regenerate HP or SP over time. With that, wouldn't he become invincible or be some sort of Gatling gun with the amount of SP he regenerates? I've chosen. Oris nodded as he made his final choice. Ding. Fruit creation has been evolved to regenerative fruit creation. If Oris was still human, his mouth would be curved at both ends, showing his happiness. But since he was a stick, he instead started to use the fruits he obtained. First, create a regenerative fruit that regenerates SP. Not long after saying that, a light blue nut sprouted out of Oris' body, radiating a soft blue light. Afterwards, 5 more nuts sprouted from his body, 4 of them being colored a slightly darker green than before and a single ash-gray nut. Oris then looked at 2 bars over his body and smiled. HP, 6 out of 6 SP, 19/19ths. With that amount of SP, he wouldn't have to worry about running out of SP while fighting. But at this moment, Oris frowned. He was currently facing another problem. A lesser Sakura branch has targeted you. You have been hit by the Confusion Pollen skill. You shall be confused for 10 seconds. Right now, only one word came out of Oris. Shit. Chapter 12. After hearing the voice from the system telling him that he was hit by a skill, specifically a skill coming from the Sakura race, he knew that he was in a predicament. Man, I'll never be this relaxed ever again, Oris sighed. Although he had a passive skill that would allow him to see everything within a 5-meter radius, most of the time he would be focused on one thing instead of everything around him. First off, let's wait until this confusion debuff dissipates. Oris took a calm breath and tried to sense his surroundings through the sounds as his sight was impaired. He could hear some rustling a few decimeters away from both sides of his body. From this, he guessed that there were at least 2 enemies. Oris looked at the time left for the confusion debuff. There was only 2 seconds left. At this point in time, Oris knew that he would either move forward or move backward to avoid the enemies from the sides. But a thought suddenly flashed in his head, remembering something his illusionist friend told him back then. At this stage of the game, inflicting debuffs on enemies would only be effective when hit directly. From this, he was sure that the stick that inflicted the confusion debuff on him wouldn't be on the left or right side of his body, since the pollen had to cover a large part of the body for it to take effect. Oris gritted his teeth at the thought. There were only 2 places left for the stick he wanted to kill to be at, either in front of him or behind him. Without any way to find out where the stick was, he was stuck at a crossroads on which direction to head. But then, he just steeled himself and said, "You know what? I'll just rely on my instincts." Whoosh! Now, the confusion debuff finally disappeared, allowing Oris to see everything in his surroundings. After one glance, he made a judgment to move forward. Whoosh! Bang! At the place where Oris previously stood was a small pile of violet pollen. This pollen was the confusion pollen of the Sakura race. Oris couldn't help but smile as he looked at the stick in front of him. That's right. Instead of moving backward, he instead moved forward to face the Sakura stick head-on. Nut shot. Bang. After he shot the skill, he felt 3 sticks heading towards him at a slow speed when compared to him. He dodged the 3 sticks with ease and shot another, nut shot, to 1 stick after the cooldown was done, surprisingly killing it. Eh? Oris was surprised. Shouldn't the sticks in this area have high HP? But while he was pondering on that question, 2 nuts that were heading towards him came out of nowhere. Whoosh! Whoosh! Of course, the nuts were moving at a speed that was still manageable for Oris, who dodged it with relative ease. Oris took a few deep breaths, well photosynthesized for a few seconds before looking at his current situation. A few decimeters away from him were two sticks that were somewhat scrawny in size, yet had this faint menacing aura surrounding them. Beside them was a broken stick that had the same appearance, presumably the stick that was killed in one shot by Horus. Behind the two sticks was a slightly gray branch that had a pinkish tint to its bark. This stick had 3 pink flowers on its body, while 2 sticks stood on each side, nuts prepared to shoot once more. Damn, Horus couldn't help but curse. I can't believe my luck is this bad that an elite enemy encounters me while I was evolving fruit creation. If evolutions could be differentiated into normal evolutions and special evolutions, of course there are also different tiers of enemies. Normal enemies are just like the lesser mahogany branch Horus fought a while ago. It was basically a weaker version of the class the player chose. But elite enemies are on a different level. Not only do they have stronger stats when compared to normal enemies, they even have skills that allow them to do more than the 3 normal stats. Ding. Ding. Horus has dealt 6 HP damage to Sakura Tamer. Da. Horus has dealt 6 HP damage to Lesser Mahogany Stick. Da. Lesser Mahogany Stick has been slain. Experience +5. The notifications explained what Horus was fighting up against. He also understood why the stick he attacked died in one shot. Although I'm up a Sakura Tamer, it can only tame stick level 1 species at most. Since the Sakura Tamer is in the lesser experience haven, that meant that it would be limited in its choices of species to tame. Even if it tried to tame species on the same level, it would fail as those kinds of species would be alert to not let their bodies be controlled. Identify Sakura Tamer. Ding. Sakura Tamer, Special, Level 3, HP, 29/35. I would have to fire 5 more nuts before it dies completely, Horus calculated how much shots he would have to do. Unless. All of a sudden, Horus started to charge towards the 2 lesser mahogany sticks in front of him. If I kill the small fries first. Nut shot. Bang. One of the 2 sticks in front of him broke into the 2 after being hit with an ash gray nut. Horus instantly removed the notification screen after seeing that he gained 5 experience. Afterwards, he started to move closer towards the other stick. At this moment, the Sakura Tamer couldn't stand it any further and commanded the stick in front of Horus to fall back. Not long after, it commanded the 2 lesser walnut sticks beside it to shoot at Horus. Of course, since the vanguards are mahogany sticks, then the rangers would be walnut sticks, right? Following the orders of their master, the remaining mahogany stick rolled back at a speed which Horus could catch up to, but did not bother. At the same time, 2 nuts headed towards Horus. Horus didn't plan to dodge it, he wanted to see the level of defense he had. Bang. Bang. You have received 0.2 HP damage. You have received 0.2 HP damage. Horus couldn't help but grin at the damage he received. It was extremely minuscule when compared to his large HP bar. Man. Your sticks are weak. Horus then rolled towards the mahogany stick after making sure the cooldown for his skill was over. As he was rolling, he changed his regeneration to HP regeneration as he sprouted 5 fruits once more. Ding! Regenerative fruit creation has leveled up. Horus couldn't help but chuckle after hearing the notification sound, producing 1 more green nut on his body. Nut shot. Bang! As if the mahogany stick was running for its life, it was shot in the back, instantly breaking apart into multiple pieces. If there was any blood, it would look more gruesome rather than just be splinters. The Sakura Tamer stood in its place. It couldn't move, well, it's more to say that it didn't move. It didn't move because of the shock Horus brought to it. As a B-grade inanimate, the Sakura Tamer had a pretty young soul that allowed it to tame lesser species. Nonetheless, since it only had a young soul, it didn't know how to choose either fights. Likewise, the lesser walnut sticks on its sides were frozen in place since the Sakura Tamer and its tamed sticks shared emotions. Using this chance, Horus shot another nut towards one of the lesser walnut sticks, successfully filling up his experience bar. Ding! Horus has leveled up. At this point, Horus moved closer to the Sakura Tamer who was still frozen in place and said, "You're next." Side note, 1. There are tiers to stick species. From lowest to highest, twig, stick, branch, and so on. Chapter 13. Trying to defend itself from the possible onslaught, the Sakura tamer commanded the only tamed stick it had to charge towards Oris with full speed. Oris looked at this and smirked. He easily dodged the lesser walnut stick's charge with his extremely high-leveled roll ++ skill. Of course, those of the walnut race did not need to move at high speeds, thus their movement skill is severely lacking. Oris used the time it took for the lesser walnut stick to rotate to prepare a shot that would easily kill the stick in one shot. Of course, it was nut shot. But all of a sudden, ding! A notification sound popped up, shocking Oris, who was sure that he didn't gain enough experience for something to level up. Nut shot has leveled up. Ah, Oris understood. It did seem weird that nut shot didn't level up at all with the amount of shots he has taken already. He only needed 3 experience points to level the nut shot skill to level 2 and combine it with his godly passive skill. If you think about it, it's weird that the skill level up notification was extremely delayed. Thinking about this, Oris got to a certain conclusion. Is this lag? Yes. Lag. The bane of every player, not only in ISE, but in any game that needed the internet to connect. Oris knew what lag was and he hated it to the core, but he just didn't understand why his system is lagging behind in notifications when no internet exists in the world of Iridinia. Not to mention, the system is connected to Oris' soul. If I find a way to fix this problem, I'm going to. Oris was muttering something as he shot out a nut, killing the lesser walnut stick in one go. But a sound he never expected to hear once more popped up. Ding! Oris has dealt 11 HP damage to lesser walnut stick. Experience +5 few, it's just a battle screen notification. Oris couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the damage he dealt and tilted his non-existent head in confusion. This isn't a critical hit at all. My damage has been increased by 50%. I wonder why. After a few moments, he knew the culprit behind it. The level up. Ding! Oh my god. Now, Oris truly didn't expect another notification sound to pop up. He opened the notification screen and, well, let's just say the system has been nerfing him all this time. Nut shot and SP storage has leveled up. Nut shot and SP storage has reached the max level. Nut shot and SP storage has met the necessary requirements and is ready to evolve. Oris couldn't help but press his non-existent fingers on his non-existent forehead in stress. If he was in danger, he would be happy with the system telling him that his skills have leveled up, but he didn't feel any happiness at all. To him, it felt like the system was trolling him. Thankfully, the Sakura tamer was still frozen in place from the fast-paced killing spree Oris did from its perspective. To Oris, though, it was extremely slow since, of course, he would fight faster species in the future. I'll have to evolve these skills after I finish this Sakura tamer. At this point, Oris didn't feel any anger towards the Sakura tamer anymore. Just anger towards his own existence evolution system. Oris hastily positioned himself in front of the still frozen Sakura tamer with his roll ++ skill and shot a nut. Bang! Ding! Oris has dealt 14 HP damage to Sakura tamer. Oh? Oris couldn't help but raise his non-existent eyebrows. It seems that the damage ideal has been increased by 33%. Anyways, if I look at my damage from before the 2 continuous level ups, I've basically doubled my damage output. As he was mumbling to himself, the cooldown for the nut shot skill ended. He then shot another nut towards the Sakura tamer, bringing its HP down to an extremely critical state. Ding! Oris has dealt 14 HP damage to Sakura tamer. Regenerative fruit creation has leveled up twice. Oris couldn't help but frown after seeing that one of his most reliable skills, regenerative fruit creation, also had delayed level ups. And not just one, but 2 of them. Oris took a deep breath and exhaled loudly as he was sure that the Sakura tamer wouldn't attack him. He formed 2 additional green nuts on his body which held more SP than it used thanks to the skill reaching the halfway point of completion. If one were to look at Oris' current stats for HP and SP, it would look like HP, 7/7 SP, 35/35 indeed. With just a level up from his SP storage skill and 2 level ups from his regenerative fruit creation skill, Horus was able to basically double the amount of HP he had. He then spared a glance towards the extremely pitiful Sakura tamer in front of him and then commanded the system to identify the enemy in front of him. Thankfully, the system didn't lag this time. Sakura tamer, special, level 3, HP, 135th. Wow, this is some heaven-defying luck, Horus couldn't help but say after seeing that the Sakura tamer was only hanging by a thread. Any last words? Horus went closer to the branch as he prepared a nut to end its life. He wasn't expecting that the branch would actually answer his question, but it turns out, fate works the opposite of what you think. No. Kill me. Since the vitality of the Sakura tamer was extremely low, it could only force itself to say these 3 words. It also shocked Horus, since from this he realized that he was actually speaking out loud whenever he thought he was talking to himself. I should be careful with my surroundings, Horus reminded himself as he looked at the branch in front of him and sighed. Think of it as fate. Bang! The nut Horus shot collided directly at the center of the Sakura tamer, breaking the branch into 2 halves, with some splinters being scattered all over the ground. Horus looked at this and sighed. Thank you for your donation. Ding! Horus has dealt 12 HP damage to Sakura tamer. Experience plus 30. Horus has leveled up. Horus looked at this with a frown. He then complained out to the skies, what the heck? My skill have level ups that are delayed by when I level up, it's just on time. What's the meaning of this? Silence filled the surroundings afterwards since the system didn't exactly interpret it as a command. Horus sighed once more and said to himself, I'll evolve, nut shot, and SP storage, first then I'll think about this problem later on. With that goal in mind, Horus then commanded, Evolve SP storage. Chapter 14. Evolve SP storage. Ding. Please select the skill that SP storage would evolve into condensed SP storage, expanded SP storage, flux SP storage. Looking at the choices in front of him, Horus pondered over his past experiences with the SP storage skill when he played as a branch of the Mahogany race back then, specializing as a close-range attacker. If I remember my choices correctly, the evolution I chose for SP storage would be to expand it so I have more SP to use for skills. But now that I'm aiming to become a mage, I can't haphazardly choose that, right? From the various MMORPGs Horus has encountered and played back then in his previous life, mages were reliant on their intelligence stat as it was the only way for them to increase their MP, attack power, and of course, the amount of spells they could unleash. Surprisingly, ISE pursued a sense of reality that MMORPGs couldn't achieve, wherein the purity of the SP the player uses affects the strength of the skills and the casting speed of the skills. Horus has faced a lot of mage class players before in ISE, most of them focused on achieving a high level of purity for their SP rather than a vessel that seemed like it would hold a boundless amount of SP. Nonetheless, in the late game periods, many mage class players would be able to achieve both, bringing terror to every player they met. Identify condensed SP storage, expanded SP storage, and flux SP storage. Ding. 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 Condensed SP storage, level 1/5, experience, 0/5 an upgraded version of the SP storage skill, focused on achieving a higher purity for SP, discarding the expansion of the storage itself. The storage has found a way to condense the SP the stick holds into a purer form, allowing skills to be casted with half the amount of SP while having higher strength. Maximum SP capacity, 5 SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute. Expanded SP storage, level 1/5, experience, 0/5 an upgraded version of the SP storage skill, focused on storing high amounts of SP. The storage expands in terms of internal space, yet remains the same externally. Once evolved to this skill, the storage can hold twice as much SP than before in the initial levels while giving the stick the ability to hold even more SP at later levels. Maximum SP capacity, 10 SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute. Flux SP storage, level 1/5, experience, 0/5, an upgraded version of the SP storage skill, focused on allowing the SP to be regenerated at a faster rate. Once evolved to this skill, the storage mutates to have SP receptors that allow the stick to absorb more SP than usual, increasing the rate of SP regeneration. In exchange, the expansion of storage has been discarded. Maximum SP capacity, 5 SP regeneration rate, 2 SP per minute. Although expanding his storage and increasing his SP regeneration rate enticed him to pick those choices, he made sure to pick his choices with a calm mind and chose the condensed SP storage skill. Now, what are the possible reasons as to why Horus chose this skill rather than the others? Well, since he aims to play as a mage this time, although it's his second life, he's trying to reference his skills from the top mages of ISE. Since he was able to achieve the existence level of God in his previous life, he was able to have a lot of connections with many mages near the existence level of God or at the level itself, and most of them had spells that had a cost at thousands up to millions of SP. Take into consideration that all of the mages Horus has met have achieved the highest purity for SP achievable in the game, yet it still costs a lot of SP. And that's why. Ding! SP storage has been evolved to condensed SP storage. Horus chose it to prepare for the future. At this moment in time, he couldn't help but sigh. Whenever he wanted to evolve his skills, he would have to go through multiple screens that mostly held useless information just so he could make a choice rather than seeing the instant benefits. System, please enable the option of seeing the instant effects of skill and species evolutions in one go, Horus decided and commanded. Ding! The option short evolution info has been enabled. Since the option was in the game, of course, it was also available in his system as well. He couldn't help but let out a light smile as he commanded, evolve, Nutshot. Nutshot, the first offensive skill he obtained and would eventually lead him to being a proper mage. His choices in evolving skills would affect his future whether he ends up becoming a mage or a ranger. Ding! Please select the skill that, Nutshot, would evolve into Dual Nutshot, Quick Nutshot, and Fused Nutshot, Special. Horus couldn't believe his eyes. Well, he didn't have eyes in the first place, but still. I know they exist, but how did I get them so early? Just like how evolutions have normal and special types, skills also have normal and special types, which affects the power of the skills depending on the tier the skill is at. From his past memories, he only had a bunch of special skills at the Transcendent skill. It was around 7 at most. His friends were not far off from the number as well, having around 4 to 8 special skills. Identify all of the possible skill evolutions. Ding! 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 Dual Nutshot. In exchange for more bullets shot, firepower stays the same. Number of bullets, from 1 to 2 SP cost, 1 SP-1 SP cooldown, 5 seconds-8 seconds. Quick Nutshot, gains more firepower thanks to its increased speed. Has a chance to land a critical hit, stacks over an 8 critical hit chance. Critical hit chance, 10% SP cost, 1 SP-3 SP cooldown, 5 seconds-10 seconds. Infused Nutshot, special, thanks to the stick having high amounts of SP, the bullets can be infused with high amounts of SP, allowing them to deal more damage. Levels of infusion, from 0 to 3 SP cost, 1 SP-2 SP, level 0, 5 SP, level 1, 10 SP, level 2, 20 SP, level 3, cooldown, 5 seconds-10 seconds. Looking at the simplified information screen in front of him, Horus could now easily find out which skill could offer him the most benefits, and of course, he would have to pick the Infused Nutshot. From its method of usage, it could give me a chance to evolve it from a skill into a magic spell. Horus' eyes gleamed as he confirmed his chance. Skills could be evolved into magic spells when a player is of the mage class. They also follow the same tier levels, mortal, transcendent, divine. But the main difference is that mortal magic spells have a might equivalent to transcendent skills. Well, if you think about it, the spells mages conjure are definitely out of this world, right? Ding! Nutshot has been evolved into Infused Nutshot, Special. Horus then looked at his skill screen and checked his progress, feeling quite contented. Yet one thing stuck out though. I'm going to have to find out how to improve wind affinity, Oris murmured. But first, how the heck do I fix delayed skill level ups? Chapter 15. It did seem weird though. Every time he did something that would garner him a possible level up in his skills, it would usually end up being delayed. Say he shoots 3 shots within a minute, which allows him to level up skill A within mere moments. It ends up becoming a level up to skill A many minutes later. Pondering for a bit, Oris then asked the question. System, why are the level ups for skills superbly delayed? Ding. Eh? Oris didn't expect to hear a notification sound. He thought that it was just an inherent fault in the system Kurahana gave him, possibly emulating the feeling of lag he despised oh so much. But hearing a notification sound, it seems that that isn't the case. To remove delayed skill level ups, please upgrade the Existence Evolution OS. Existence Evolution OS? At this moment, Oris was really confused. Back in his previous life, there was nothing called the Existence Evolution OS, only the Evolution Tree, Genesis Tree, Divinity Realm, and so on. While he was wondering why there was something like this, an idea flashed in his mind. Since I've been reborn into a stick, the system I have is from the game, but it doesn't stop there, Oris continued to deduce until all of a sudden, his eyes gleamed. Does that mean that I can evolve the system to the point that it exceeds the capabilities of the system within the game? With this in mind, Oris asked, how do I upgrade the Existence Evolution OS? Ding. To open the Existence Evolution OS, please say Open OS. To upgrade the OS, you can use OS points. Oris only listened to the first statement and ignored the second, prompting him to say, Open OS. Ding. In an instant, a somewhat large screen appeared in front of his field of vision, occupying most of his view. Nonetheless, he made sure to check if there were enemies nearby before asking so he could be considered to be safe at the moment. Existence Evolution OS, OS points, 1 level up synchronization, 0/10, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point artificial intelligence, 0/1, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point memory DLC, 0/3, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point. Oris couldn't help but frown at the 3 options on the large screen. One of them was related to the problem he was currently facing, but the other 2 were something of another level. He assumed that the remaining 2 options on the screen would possibly affect his future progress. All of a sudden, he noticed something. OS points? Where do I get them? How did I get one? 3 questions instantly appeared in Oris' mind. Thankfully, the system instantly answered his question. Ding. OS points are points used by the EEOS to improve itself and adapt to the needs of the user. To obtain them, the user must have to achieve certain tasks. As for how the user got one, it will be answered in due time. Hearing the vague answer that came out from the system, Oris instantly got an urge to punch the system to shreds, only to realize that the system is intangible and he can't punch it. Ha! Oris calmed himself down by taking a few deep breaths and then looked at the options from a rational perspective. Identify the options in front of me, Oris commanded. Ding. 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 Within a few seconds, 3 modestly sized screens appeared in front of the large screen Oris was staring at a while ago, which allowed him to look at the advantages and disadvantages of each option. Level up synchronization, the system was born imperfect, thus becoming unreliable whenever the user needs its help. One of these imperfections is that the leveling up of skills is delayed to various degrees, bringing the user's life in danger. Once upgraded to its first level, the problem shall be removed. Once upgraded to its maximum, there's a chance for the system to reward twice the amount of level ups. Note, movement skills and player level ups are excluded. Artificial intelligence, the system was born imperfect, thus becoming unreliable whenever the user needs its help. One of these imperfections is that it doesn't have the sentience capable of helping the user in its mundane tasks. Once upgraded, the system attains sentience, allowing the system to adapt to every situation the user is in. It also unlocks the Existence Evolution AI section of the EEOS. Memory DLC, the system was born imperfect, thus becoming unreliable whenever the user needs its help. One of these imperfections is that the system doesn't allow the user to access all of their memories, becoming a hindrance rather than a tool. Once upgraded to the first level, it allows the user to access more of their memories, allowing them to use their memories to logically and rationally make decisions. Once upgraded to its maximum, the user can access all of their memories from their previous life, allowing them to think ahead. Oris closed the 3 screens and looked at the large screen once more, letting out a long breath. He was unsure of what to choose. At the moment, he only had 1 point to use to upgrade the system's OS, plus he wasn't sure if there was even a way to upgrade the OS. In the end, Oris closed the screen and sighed. I guess I'll have to live with this nuisance for a while. But once I find out that I can earn more OS points to upgrade the system OS, I'm sure that I'll use the first one to upgrade level up synchronization. Placing that thought in the back of his head, Oris then went to his next problem. Wind Affinity. Wind Affinity, a skill Oris obtained after evolving into the wind variant of the walnut stick species. It was a passive skill that allowed him to increase the attack power and attack speed of the skills he used, yet for some reason, along the way, even in his fights, it never gained any experience. Not even once. In his previous life, Oris would always hear that any player that gains an elemental affinity skill would surely become a strong existence at the Ascendant or God tier. They would have the power to shake the earth and tear the skies asunder. Plus, Oris was sure that upgrading his Wind Affinity skill in addition to gaining more SP would allow him more evolutions once he gets the chance to evolve to an A-grade inanimate. Thinking for a bit, Oris opened his map and set a marker towards a place that only players at the level of at least the X-grade inanimate would tread towards. Set a destination to the Tempest Cliff. Chapter 16. Ding. Within seconds, a clear blue path manifested on top of his current surroundings, while a large blue triangle also manifested on top of his body, hovering with a number over it. 15,000 meters. In other words, 15 kilometers. In his current life, it would be the greatest distance he has ever trekked before. Even the whole Lesser Experience Haven had a diameter of 5 kilometers. To think that he was going to a place that was 3 Lesser Experience Havens apart from him. To any rational person, it was crazy talk. But for Oris, he would do it because he remembered a few things from a friend of his that luckily gained an elemental affinity skill. Head towards a place that is abundant in the certain element your element affinity is needing and stay there for a while so it levels up. That friend of his told him this statement, and surprisingly in his previous life, Oris was able to get an elemental affinity skill, and this statement helped him a lot. Roll ++, he commanded. Whoosh! In an instant, as if a tempestuous storm was being created around Oris' surroundings, a strong wind aura covered Oris' body and propelled him forward at a speed that was at least twice of his previous movement speed when Roll ++ was at level 1. Then again, thinking about it, his Roll ++ was already at level 7, not long from reaching its peak. Onwards to the Tempest Cliff. Oris shouted as he embarked on his first long journey towards a place filled with dangers for his current level. The world of Erudinia was split into 4 continents. One of these continents stood a large kingdom known as the Seraph Kingdom. Unfortunately, this kingdom was in the same continent where Oris was. XXXX continent, Seraph Kingdom, an unknown room. Within this room was a man in his late 20s that exuded an aura of arrogance and wisdom, which were 2 contrasting qualities. But in front of this man, it seemed that both of these qualities harmonized each other, making him look like a brave hero of legends. He wore clothing that was befitting of his rank. He had jet black hair and yellow irises that made anyone who looked directly at it kneel down with respect. This person was one of the 12 princes of the Seraph Kingdom, Prince Vanadir. Ding! 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 A melodious chime sound could be heard resonating throughout the room. Prince Vanadir located where the sound came from and not long after, pulled out a crystal from his pocket. This crystal was the one causing the melodious chime sound. A call? I wonder who could it be? Prince Vanadir didn't really expect to get a call from someone at this time. It was only noon at the moment, he just finished eating his lunch. Nonetheless, he accepted the call. Kacha. Hello, why your highness? At first, the voice that came from the crystal was choppy, but after a while, the voice became clearer, letting Vanadir recognize who was calling him. Ah! If it isn't Dane, my great high mage friend. Vanadir couldn't help but reply with a smile after recognizing who called him. Since you called me, I assume that you're going to tell me something important, yes? Dane, who was at the other side of the call, nodded unconsciously even though Vanadir couldn't see him nod. Indeed, it's about the material you needed in order to craft your specialized weapon. Vanadir didn't expect that Dane would call him about the material he needed. He vigorously stood up from where he sat and shouted in surprise, "What? You're telling me you found the wind branch?" No, Dane shook his head as he replied. At this moment, he let out a small giggle which could be heard from the other side of the call. It's something even better. What could possibly be better than a wind branch? Vanadir frowned a bit after hearing Dane's statement, but after a while, Dane's eyes widened in shock. Don't tell me it's what you're thinking, Dane replied with certainty. A mana-infused wind branch. A woodcutter happened to pass by it a few days ago while he was chopping some trees from the desolate forest. Do you want to know its true name? Hearing the phrase mana-infused wind branch, Vanadir couldn't help but jump in joy. With a mana-infused wind branch as the core of my specialized weapon, with my current power as a rank 2 junior windwalker, I could possibly reach the combat power of a beginner rank 4 grand windwalker. At this moment, Vanadir knew he was getting too excited and took a few deep breaths to calm himself. Not long after, he then asked, "What's its true name?" Dane, after a few moments of silence, answered, "The wind walnut branch." Unknowingly, over 3 days have passed ever since Aura started heading towards the Tempest Cliff. During this time, other than rolling, he was raising the levels for his SP storage, skill, regenerative fruit creation, skill, and infused nut shot, skill. To be honest, who could blame Horus, who previously didn't have any skills to level while rolling other than his movement skill? Of course, he would use this idle time to make himself stronger, as a rough plan was formulated in his mind. First, raise Wind Affinity to at least B-grade mortal level. Then, head back to the Lesser Experience Haven and kill the boss of the Haven to obtain a special item. Afterwards, evolve. After a while, another notification screen popped up in front of Horus. Horus looked at it for a bit before placing it to the side of his field of vision, as the notification sound he wanted to pop up hasn't appeared yet. And finally, after shortening the distance to only 4 kilometers between him and the Tempest Cliff, Horus looked at the notification screen in front of him, making his eyes light up. Finally, the notification he was waiting for. Ding! Regenerative Fruit Creation has leveled up twice. Condensed SP Storage has leveled up 4 times. Infused Nut Shot has leveled up 4 times. Roll++ has leveled up thrice. Regenerative Fruit Creation, Condensed SP Storage, Infused Nut Shot, and Roll++ has reached the max level. Regenerative Fruit Creation, Condensed SP Storage, Infused Nut Shot, and Roll++ has met the necessary requirements needed and is ready to evolve. At this point, Aura stopped where he was and looked at his surroundings to see if any possible enemies were nearby. Making sure that there was none, he let out a grin only he could see. Man, I ended up heading towards the Tempest Cliff at a level lower than what was recommended. I shouldn't have haphazardly decided to head there without preparing. Anyways, raising all of these to the max level would help me last a bit longer there, so. Evolve, Roll++. Chapter 17. Ding. Since Horus enabled the option of letting him see the instant benefits of the skill evolution, he was able to decide which skill would help him in the long run. Please choose the skill that, Roll++, would evolve into Ascended Roll, Sonic Roll X Burst, Tempest Roll, Special. Eh? Another special skill? How does that even happen? Horus was in disbelief after seeing that evolving his Roll++ skill would lead him to getting another special skill. Getting Infused Nut Shot was understandable since he had more SP than usual, allowing him to choose that option. But seriously though, a special movement skill? Whatever. I'll just identify each and every of them. And so he did. Ding. 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 Ascended Roll, you're already rolling at a speed that's fast for a stick, but I guess you want to roll even faster. Rate of movement, 150 meters per hour - 250 meters per hour. Sonic Roll X Burst, look who's back to haunt you, Indeed, it's the upgraded version of Breeze Burst. Rate of movement, 150 meters per hour - nothing changes burst distance, from 0 to 500 meters cooldown time, from 0 to 3 hours. Tempest Roll, special, being one with the wind, your proficiency with the roll series of movement skills has ascended to another level, allowing you to move at high speeds for a short amount of time. Rate of movement, 150 meters per hour - 250 meters per hour. The skill, Tempest Burst, is created. Man, looking at these short descriptions, it feels like it's telling me to choose Tempest Roll rather than the other two. Aurus sighed. I'm sure as hell that I'm gonna choose Tempest Roll since it's a special skill, but what's Tempest Burst? Ding. Tempest Burst, with high proficiency and affinity with the wind, the stick can temporarily control large amounts of wind, allowing the stick to either move faster, or attack with stronger force. Effect, 2x the movement speed, and attack power. Effect duration, 10 seconds. Cooldown, 6 hours. Note, effect duration, and cooldown amount is proportional to the level of the Tempest Roll skill. Aurus instantly became speechless after reading the effects of Tempest Burst. Since Tempest Roll was a special skill, he expected some special effect, and Tempest Burst was that special effect. But who knew that Tempest Burst did not just increase his firepower and movement speed, but it also did not use any SP at all? Without hesitation, Aurus chose Tempest Roll. It was a skill that was hard to pass. Ding. Roll++ has been evolved into Tempest Roll. Okay, next. Aurus said. Evolve Condensed SP Storage. Ding. Please choose the skill that Condensed SP Storage would evolve into Purified SP Storage, Broadened SP Storage, Condensed Flux SP Storage. Looking at his choices, Aurus had a feeling that each of these choices either revolved over three aspects: purification, expansion, and regeneration. But of course, heeding the words of his mage friends, maxing out the purity of SP will be useful in the long run. Identify. Ding. 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 Purified SP Storage, when you thought SP couldn't get any more pure, but it did. Maximum SP capacity, 10 SP - 10 SP. SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute - 1 SP per minute. Note, SP cost of skills have been halved. Broadened SP storage, the SP is already condensed, so why bother condensing it further if you can expand the amount of SP you can hold? Maximum SP capacity, 10 SP - 20 SP. SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute - 1 SP per minute. Condensed flux SP storage, condensed SP but faster regeneration rate. Neat. Maximum SP capacity, 10 SP - 10 SP. SP regeneration rate, 1 SP per minute - 2 SP per minute. Of course, Aurus wouldn't waver in his choices, picking Purified SP Storage from the get-go. Did he need increased SP regeneration rate? He had the Fruit Creation skill for that. Expanded SP Storage? Fruit Creation skill. Ding. Condensed SP Storage has been evolved into Purified SP Storage. Before continuing to evolve the two skills he could evolve, an idea flashed through his head, making him slap himself. How could I forget about this? System, make the skill grades visible. Ding. Skill grades are now visible. Aurus nodded at the system's voice before continuing. Evolve Regenerative Fruit Creation. Ding. Please choose the skill that Regenerative Fruit Creation would evolve into Siphoning Fruit Creation, Hallucinatory Fruit Creation, Revitalizing Fruit Creation. Oh? Aurus raised his non-existent eyebrow after looking at the choices for the evolution of the Regenerative Fruit Creation skill. Identify. Ding. 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 Siphoning Fruit Creation, Grade A, Mortal. Rather than regenerating naturally from the environment, why not just siphon them from your enemies? Maximum amount of fruits, from 10 to 10. Maximum amount of regenerative fruits, from 3 to 0. Maximum amount of siphoning fruits, from 0 to 3. Maximum SP capacity per fruit, 5 SP - 5 SP. Note, only 20% of the enemy's HP and SP will be siphoned at most. Hallucinatory fruit creation, grade A, mortal, in exchange for regeneration. Instead, you inflict debuffs on your enemies, allowing you to kill them faster. Maximum amount of fruits, from 10 to 10 maximum amount of regenerative fruits, from 3 to 0 maximum amount of hallucinatory fruits, from 0 to 3 maximum SP capacity per fruit, 5 SP-5 SP. Note: debuffs at the starting level are only paralysis and confusion. When eaten by another species, they might become high. Revitalizing fruit creation, grade A, mortal, enhancing the limits of regeneration. The fruits can heal more SP/HP amount of time. Not to mention, the fruits can hold more SP thanks to the fruits being evolved rather than replaced. Maximum amount of fruits, from 10 to 15 maximum amount of regeneration fruits, from 3 to 5 maximum SP capacity per fruit, 5 SP-10 SP. Without a doubt, Oris chose the last choice, revitalizing fruit creation. Of course, who wouldn't choose a skill that increased your SP capacity and regeneration rate when you're aiming to become a mage? Ding! Regenerative fruit creation has been evolved into revitalizing fruit creation. Oris looked at the 2 A-grade skills he had and the S-grade movement skill he had. He was truly happy to be able to evolve these skills at this grade while he was still a B-grade inanimate. He was bound to get at least special evolutions once he reached the max level. And finally, evolve Infused Nut Shot. Ding! His offensive skill that helped him kill enemies so he could level up, while his only offensive skill to help him kill enemies so he could up. He was finally evolving it to A grade. Please choose the skill that, Infused Nut Shot, would evolve into Extreme Infused Nut Shot, Special, Lowest Nut Spell Core, Special, Nut Trident Triad, Special. His eyes lit up at the options given to him. It came. It came. Oris was exhilarated to see that a spell core skill appeared on the choices of his possible evolutions for the Infused Nut Shot skill. To a mage player, a spell core skill was the gateway to start learning magic spells and is even the foundation for the power of said magic spells. But wait a second, just a normal spell core? Oris felt that something was off after looking at the name. I'm a wind walnut stick, which means that my magic spells should have the wind element to them. In that case, it should be called a lowest wind nut spell core or something. Maybe it's because I haven't raised wind affinity yet? Oris felt that this might be the reason why he couldn't get a wind nut spell core skill as a choice. If that's the case, I'll just evolve it to the one of the 2 choices then. Nonetheless, I want to see its effects. Identify. Ding! Extreme Infused Nut Shot, Special, Grade A, Mortal, with the stick's SP capacity being extremely high, the nut could be infused with more SP, thus being granted more power. SP cost, 2, 5, 10, 20 SP-3, 10, 20, 30 SP, level 0 to 3, 50 SP, level 4, 70 SP, level 5, cooldown, 10 seconds-15 seconds. Lowest Nut Spell Core, Grade A, Mortal. Understanding how SP is formed and utilized, the stick gains the idea of using its nuts as a foundation for the spells that consume SP, thus creating a spell core. Every time the spell core becomes stronger, more magic spells can be used and the spell's attack power gets stronger. Spell Damage Boost, 5% maximum number of spells, 1 spell list, Energy Bolt, SP cost, 2, 5, 10, 20 SP-20 SP cooldown, 10 seconds-0 seconds. Note: the spell core can be created and disassembled at any time. Nut Trident Triad, Special, utilizing the intricacies of SP and the walnut produced by the stick is able to use its ingenuity to allow the nut shot to have 3 forms, one being endless, one being deadly, and one being unavoidable. SP cost, 5 SP per second, Sanction form, 30 SP, Judgment form, 20 SP, Law form, cooldown, 10 seconds-15 seconds. Note: the Sanction form shoots out an endless amount of nuts. Judgment form shoots out a single nut having extreme attack power, and Law form shoots out a single nut that's unavoidable by the enemy. As expected from the lowest grade of the spell core skill, only the most basic spell is added, Oris muttered as he remembered his mage friends using Energy Bolt multiple times to increase their spell repertoire. The Extreme Infused Nut Shot is just an upgraded version of Infused Nut Shot. It doesn't really bring anything new to the table. But Nut Trident Triad, I wonder if it could make the possible spell core skill become more special once I evolve Wind Affinity to a higher grade. After a bit of pondering, Horus decided to choose the Nut Trident Triad skill. He was eager to see the possibilities while fighting enemies of the Tempest Cliff. Since they're at least S grade, I'm sure that Nut Trident Triad will help me become flexible for every situation. Ding! Infused Nut Shot has been evolved into Nut Trident Triad. Horus nodded and then used his newfound Tempest Roll skill to shorten the distance between him and the Tempest Cliff. I hope I survive the oncoming onslaught. Chapter 18. Over 15 hours have passed since Horus evolved 4 of his skills in preparation for his journey into the Tempest Cliff. 3 of these skills were now at the A-grade mortal level, while the remaining skill, which was his movement skill, is now at the S-grade mortal level. This level is only 1 grade away from being X-grade, and 2 grades away from being a transcendent level skill. Ha, I finally made it. Horus couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief after seeing the view in front of him. At the place where he was currently standing, there was only a slight breeze, faintly noticeable by a normal person. For Horus, who had Wind Affinity, although a basic version of it, he was sensitive to wind so he could feel it without a doubt. A few meters away from him was the entrance to the Tempest Cliff. This part of the Tempest Cliff alone had winds exceeding possibly 100 km/h speeds. And to think that the name of the cliff was Tempest Cliff, anyone with common sense would of course think that the speed of the winds would only get more and more intense. Ding! Breaking the somewhat tense atmosphere, a notification sound popped up, scaring Horus, who was intensely staring at the place in front of him. Nonetheless, he was able to calm himself down and look at the notification with a slight smile. Tempest Roll has leveled up. Sweet! I only have 18 more levels to go before I can evolve it to an X-grade skill. Horus sarcastically laughed at his progress. In his memories, the maximum level of skills and species double every grade. For a skill at C grade, the maximum level is 3. This is then doubled to 5 once the skill reaches B grade. Afterwards, it becomes 10 for A grade, 20 for S grade, and so on. Thinking about it further, the maximum level for Transcendent and Divine level skills would be at the hundreds, no, even thousands. Combine that with high experience requirements and you're basically living a grinding hell. Good thing I have that passive skill. Horus let out a sigh of relief. Kurahana was really thoughtful to give Horus that kind of skill. Anyways, I should prepare before entering. The amount of regeneration fruits Horus can currently produce is 5. Without hesitation, Horus produced 5 regeneration fruits focused on regenerating his SP and positioned them at one end of his body. Afterwards, he formed 15 fruits, 14 of which were transformed into SP storage, while the remaining 1 was left as a normal nut. Horus had a feeling that his evolved offensive skill still needed a spare nut to use. Nonetheless, the amount of SP Horus currently had in proportion was definitely outstanding to say the least. Now let's see how much SP I engage. Horus looked at the 2 bars on top of his body, only to shout out in surprise at his current stats. HP, 8/8 SP, 150/150, that's correct. With the help of Horus' overpowered passive skill named Blessing of the Reincarnation Goddess, he was able to amass 150 SP while still being a B-grade inanimate. Looking at this large number gave Horus the confidence to rush towards the center of the Tempest Cliff. Alright, here we go. Tempest Roll. Whoosh. But he ended up getting carried away by the strong wind. Oh no! Kurahana's dimension. The god of the underworld, Hadouken, was talking to her. Teach me how to craft a primordial weapon. Hadouken looked at Kurahana with a fawning gaze, which only made it look creepy. Kurahana looked at Hadouken for a bit, staring at his unsettling puppy eyes. Making a decision, she pressed her fingers on his forehead as she pondered before replying, well, a primordial weapon is already a second-tier divine level weapon. Crafting one is multiple times harder than crafting an archaic weapon. She then explained with a serious tone, nonetheless, it's way easier than crafting a lesser divine weapon, needing materials from the god realm. Primordial weapons need a demigod-grade material as a base, that's for sure. May it be frigid Aeon metal or Zenith World bamboo, as long as it's of the demigod grade, it can work. But the most important thing needed for a primordial weapon is... Kurohana squinted her eyes, implying that this part is important. A soul. A soul? Hadouken was slightly confused. Why would someone need a soul to create a primordial weapon, or any weapon to be exact? Doesn't a weapon only need materials to be crafted? Hadouken thought. What's the soul for? The soul is there so your primordial weapon becomes a primordial evolving weapon, which means it could grow to lesser divine, greater divine, or even deity grade, Kurohana replied as a craftswoman who had millions of years of experience. If you don't care about that though, you can just shove an artifacts, one, inside the weapon. Hadouken pondered over her words for a bit before nodding his head. I see. Thanks for the suggestion. Kurohana then smiled sweetly as if she was looking at her special other. No problem. Afterwards, the call ended, allowing Kurohana to focus her attention back to Oris once more. Oh? Kurohana's interest was piqued after seeing where Oris currently was. He obtained Wind Affinity, huh? If he pursues that path, that might allow me to craft a weapon that's more agile than before. Kurohana then smiled. Let's see how far he gets. The Tempest Cliff, a place only meant for those who have innate affinity with the wind element or are inclined to the wind element. Every stick and variant of stick within this place has adapted to this place for many years, allowing to move through the wind like it was nothing and utilized the wind to their advantage. At this moment, Oris was still flying through the Tempest Cliff thanks to the strong winds that carried him. Oris couldn't help but panic at his current situation. He entered the Tempest Cliff so he could increase the level of his wind affinity, not getting blown away by the wind. Didn't he say that I can just stand inside the elemental area and I would passively gain experience? Oris frowned at the thought. It looks like he was lying. As he was complaining about what his friend said, Oris realized something that he discarded a while ago. He was a stick within the world of Iridinia, not a player playing in the world of Iridinia. It wasn't a game anymore, but rather a way of life. At this time, Oris closed his eyes and started to breathe slowly and consistently, letting the wind flow all over his body. If skills were leveled through repeated usage, affinity of course would be leveled through being one with the element. But it doesn't stop there. Affinity also needs the person to comprehend the element. This was what he realized. Ding! After a few minutes, a notification sound appeared, forcing Oris to open his eyes. Nonetheless, he looked at the notification with glee. Wind affinity has leveled up. Alright. I just need to comprehend a bit more and I'll be able to evolve it. Oris shouted with glee as he was still being carried away. Although that was the case, he had a faint feeling that he was able to become one with the wind, allowing him to control the wind. Yet all of a sudden, a menacing intent was felt by Oris from far away. Not only that, the menacing intent was getting closer and closer to him, as if it was out to get him. He then looked around his surroundings to see a large branch aiming something towards him. Oris looked at this and couldn't help but say, "Oh shit." Side note 1, artifacts, plural artifices, are the god equivalent of the heavenly bodies created by the Creator. They can do multiple things, even becoming a catalyst for weapons. Chapter 19. Without hesitation, the large branch shot out the thing it aimed towards Oris. It was a walnut. From this alone, Oris knew that he was up against a walnut race of the higher grade. Ha. Oris took a few deep breaths as he looked at the shot that was gradually inching towards him. Well, to be more exact, it was traveling at a speed that's fast for a normal branch, but not for Oris. Oris calmed himself down and regained his composure as the remaining normal walnut on his body started to compress and elongate into a weird shape. A few tenths of a second later, the walnut transformed into a small trident that definitely did not look like a walnut at all. This is gonna take out a lot of my current SP, but I have a high regeneration rate anyway. Oris thought for a bit before weighing the pros and cons. The pros outweighed the current cons, nut, trident, triad, law. Swoosh! Of course, after fully realizing that he was living a life in the world of Iridinia, he didn't use his skills for a single purpose anymore, allowing him to become flexible when it comes to multiple situations. At the current moment, Horus decided to test out his new offensive skill in blocking the nut shot by the large branch. Bang! Since the nut trident shot by Horus was faster than the nut shot by the large branch thanks to the wind affinity skill, the nut shot by the large branch was easily shattered into pieces thanks to the nut trident's homing function. Since the nut trident still had spare strength, it continued to head towards the large branch. Intruder. All of a sudden, the large branch started to speak. Eh? It can speak? Is it something like the Sakura tamer I fought against back then? As far as Horus knew, the synchronization rate is the gauge for the level of a stick soul. The large branch was able to say a word like intruder easily, making Horus guess that the large branch was at least A grade. After a few more seconds, the nut trident shot by Horus collided with the large branch's body, inflicting some damage to the large branch, but not enough to scare it. Ding! Horus has dealt 24 HP to Branch Formosus and Aegistus. After looking at the notification screen, he placed it where it couldn't block his field of vision. Afterwards, he looked at the HP bar on top of the large branch he attacked. Holy heck! I only nicked off like 10% of its HP after dealing 24 HP damage? Horus said in disbelief. I'm guessing it has a maximum HP of around 240 or something if that's the case. But first, I should get down on the ground. Being in midair would make me incredibly vulnerable. With a lot of effort, Horus was able to get down on the ground thanks to his recently improved wind affinity skill. Nonetheless, the time it took for Horus to get down was incredibly long, allowing the large branch to shoot a few nuts along Horus' way. This forced Horus to waste some SP on destroying the nuts. It also damaged the large branch by a bit, bringing its HP down to 70%. Ha, finally on the ground. Horus couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief after traveling in midair for a while. Although it would allow him to comprehend the wind faster, he didn't really like the feeling. Ding. Horus' interest was piqued after hearing a notification sound, only to sarcastically laugh afterwards. Revitalizing fruit creation has leveled up. I almost forgot. The level ups are still delayed. Horus then looked at the damage screen he got a while ago, showing the name of the enemy he was currently fighting against. A. Branch Formosus and Aegistus. Definitely a long name I wouldn't bother remembering, Horus said to himself. Anyways, knowing my enemies is basically winning 99% of the battle or something like that so. System, what is a Branch Formosus? And what does an Aegistus mean? Horus noticed that the two of them were separated by an M-, which got him thinking that perhaps the second part was a variant of the first part. Ding! Not long after, two notification screens explaining the two parts appeared in front of Horus. In the midst of all this, the large branch shot out 3 more nuts towards Horus, making Horus retaliate with a single nut trident triad law. How much SP do I still have? Horus checked his SP bar by looking upwards. 60% left? I guess that's enough to check the 2 remaining forms of nut trident triad. Placing that matter in the back of his head, he then checked the information given by the system. A branch formosus is an evolved version of the branch, one of the 2 paths a branch can evolve to, other than the sapling path. The branch formosus is the A-grade version of the branch. An Aegistus is a variant of the species that specializes in manipulating and channeling energy, allowing them to do things that are usually impossible to do. In fantasy terms, the Aegistus are mages. Heh, my goal, huh? Horus looked at the enemy in front of him in a new light. Since I'm planning to become a mage, then I should kill a mage first, right? All of a sudden, the large branch shouted out once more. Puny branch, die. Bang. 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 3 nuts were shot towards Horus. But instead of the 3 nuts being side by side, these 3 were shot in a triangular formation, which meant that Horus could not destroy them all with a single nut trident. But Horus couldn't help but laugh at the large branch. Then again, its synchronization rate is at most 40% if my deduction is correct. It's nowhere near my intelligence. Of course, he didn't destroy the 3 nuts, but instead, he dodged them. Whoosh! Tempest roll. Since he was already on the ground, why would he need to use up SP to stop the 3 nuts if he could just dodge it? Next up, Tempest burst. Horus shouted. Bang! As if a large explosion just occurred within Horus' body, an iridescent aura instantly covered Horus, letting him feel that he could do anything if he wanted to. But of course that feeling was just an illusion. Whoosh! Nonetheless, his speed that was already at 260 meters per hour was doubled to over 500 meters per hour, allowing him to close the dozen-meter gap between them in just seconds. Identify. Since Horus wanted to be sure, he checked the status of his enemy that was already damaged. He also wanted to find out which form of the Nut Trident Triad he would use. You know what? I'll just use the other form later. Ding! Branch Formosus, Energistus, Special, Level 5, HP, 153/250. HM. My guesses were correct. This large branch had around that much HP, Horus let out a light smile. But to think that this enemy was an elite? Hey, it's gonna die here anyway. Within seconds, Horus formed another Nut Trident that hovered over his body. After using 30 of his SP to increase the attack power of the Nut Trident, he then aimed it towards the large branch. Take this. Nut Trident Triad, Judgment. As he said this, the large branch tried to get away from the Nut Trident shot by Horus. But alas, it was all in vain. Thanks to the large amount of SP Horus used to execute the Judgment form, it was bound to have some unavoidable properties. Combine that with his Wind Affinity skill and his activated Tempest Burst, this Nut Trident held an attack power and speed unrivaled among the B-grade inanimates. Bang! In just one shot, the large branch was disintegrated into multiple small pieces of wood, leaving Horus standing as he looked at its remains. It couldn't even leave any words before it died. But Horus didn't mind it, he was instead eager to see the results of his fight. Ding! Here it comes. Horus then looked at the notification screen, only to have a face filled with utter shock. Critical hit. Horus has dealt 162 HP damage to Branch Formosus Energistus. Thanks to Horus for fighting an enemy surpassing his grade, the experience received will be doubled. Experience plus 200. Horus has leveled up. Horus has reached the max level. Horus has met the necessary requirements and is now ready to evolve. Chapter 20. Damn, that's a lot of experience from just killing a single A-grade enemy, Horus couldn't help but say in shock. Even though 200 might not seem like a lot for a late-game player, it was a lot for Horus, who had to start over from the beginning, and the most he has gotten before was 30. But of course, he didn't waste his time on being ecstatic after getting that much experience. He was inside the Tempest Cliff, a place where only X-grade inanimates are said to be safe, and anything lower than that is suicide. Before I evolve, let's see my current stats and compare it to how much I had when I was level 1. Horus decided to open up his status screen one last time before evolving. He didn't know why, but it felt like he had to do it before evolving. Open status screen. Ding. Horus, level 5/5, experience, max species, Wind Walnut Branch, special, existence level, inanimate grade, B, HP, 10/10, SP, 150/150 stats, toughness, 10, thickness, 10, shell hardness, 10 synchronization rate, 20% in used experience points, 150 in used Genesis points, 0. Looking at his current status screen, he was able to see how much stronger he has gotten ever since he evolved. If he were to fight against a level 1 version of his twig self, he would easily hundreds of them with a single offensive skill. Since I'm going to evolve and revitalizing fruit creation leveled up, the amount of fruits I can make has been increased to 16. I don't need a spare nut for evolving anyway, so I'll just make everything SP storage. Horus said this as he changed all of his nuts into SP storage. From there, his maximum SP capacity was raised from 150 to 170. Well, let's not delay this any further. Evolve. Ding. In an instant, Horus was given 5 choices for his next evolution. But once he continued to look at the choices, only shock covered his non-existent face. Please choose the species that Oris will evolve into: Walnut Branch Formosus, Wind Reniros, Special, Walnut Branch Formosus, Wind Energistus, Special, Walnut Sapling, Wind Reniros, Special, Walnut Sapling, Wind Energistus, Special, Wind Walnut Spiritus, Rare. A rare class? Oris couldn't believe it. He was only expecting to evolve to a special class at most, since his current species is a special class as well. How the heck? Gah, this is frustrating to think about. Ever since Oris was reborn into a stick, only surprises filled his life. Thanks to the godly passive skill Kurahana gave him, he was able to transition into a special class as a B-grade inanimate. And with the same passive skill, he was able to beat an enemy of a higher grade and even gain access to evolving as a rare class. In ISE, most players have only heard of special classes. Those classes alone have the ability to become great players at the Transcendent and God level, but all special classes know they're a rarer class compared to them. They know those classes might, and they don't want to fight against them ever. The lowest tier of those classes are rare classes. Although rare class are just one grade above special classes, the gap between them is insurmountable. If special classes can do things normal classes can't, then rare classes can do things special classes can't. I guess I know what I'm going to change into. Oris couldn't help but sarcastically laugh. Who could pass up the chance of gaining a rare class? Wind Energistus, huh? Since Oris knew he was going to pick the final choice, he took his time on checking the other classes so he could know more about the enemies he could possibly fight against. If I remember correctly, Energistus variants are mage variants of that species. Since the word wind is placed before it, then a special class would be an elemental mage. What is Reniros, though? Oris asked the system as he quickly scanned his surroundings if any enemies were nearby. Seeing that there were none, Oris paid attention to what the system said. Ding! Reniros are variants of a certain species that specialize in attacking enemies from a long range. Though they could fight against enemies unscathed and even control the battle, the cooldown time for their skills are exceptionally long. In fantasy terms, these variants are called Rangers. Rangers and mages, huh? At this point, Oris felt that everything made more sense. All of the classes he evolved into in his previous life didn't really have any weird names like Energistus or Reniros, but instead went straight to the point like Warrior or Guardian. How many variants are there? And what are they called in fantasy terms? Since it's assured that Oris would fight against enemies that had classes in the future, he had to prepare for every situation in case he had to fight a certain class. Ding! There are 6 common variants as far as this system knows. These are Energistus, Reniros, Elusis, Azrael, Wurii, and Belhazard. The user already know the fantasy terms of Energistus and Reniros, being mage and ranger respectively. As for Elusis and Azrael, they're called illusionists and assassins in fantasy terms. Wurii and Belhazard is warrior and berserker in fantasy terms respectively. I see. I guess the variants are also based on the race the stick is from, Oris deduced after a bit of thinking. To him, it might be the reason why there was no walnut race warrior or assassin, something like that. I almost forgot, this is where true classes start to pop up. Although it said that B-grade inanimates gain a class, to be more specific, they're picking a race they want to be a part of. From there, once they reach the max level and evolve, that's where they truly gain their class. Well, with that taken care of, let's see what offers do these evolutions give. I'll check the Ranger variant of the Branch Formosus and the Sapling, the Mage variant of the Sapling, and of course, Wind Walnut Spiritus. Disable short evolution info. Identify the species I've just said. Ding! The option short evolution info has been disabled. Ding! 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 Walnut Branch Formosus, Wind Reniros, Special, Existence Level, Inanimate Grade, or rather than staying rooted in one place and accepting the blessings of the world, the branch decides to forge its own path of power, becoming a stronger form of itself, a Branch Formosus. It has also decided to become calm and collective in its decisions, even going as far as attacking from long range, sacrificing time for power and control. With the branch's affinity for wind, this is also imbued in its attacks, gaining an edge over normal classes. The special class active skill, Tempest Net Arrow, is created. The special class active skill, Tempest Bind, is created. The special class passive skill, Wind Renairo's Seed, is created. The species active skill, Forging the Path, is created. The species active skill, Spirit Plundering, is created. The species passive skill, Spirit Manifestation, is created. That's a lot of skills for a single evolution, Horus couldn't help but say. For the normal evolutions from C grade to B grade, only around 2 to 3 skills were given. As for Horus, who obtained a special class as a B grade evolution, he was given 4 skills. Having a special class does have its benefits. Since there are 2 paths for evolving as a species, then there are species-specific skills as well. I wonder what species-specific skills the sapling path has. Walnut sapling, Wind Renairo's, special, existence level, inanimate grade, A. Accepting the blessings of the world, the branch stays rooted to one place, getting stronger passively as time passes. It doesn't mean that the sapling couldn't move though. It has decided to become calm and collected in its decisions, also sacrificing time for power and control. As it has gained an affinity for the wind, all of its attacks are imbued with the element of wind, gaining an edge over normal classes. The special class active skill, Tempest Net Arrow, is created. The special class active skill, Tempest Bind, is created. The special class passive skill, Wind Renairo's Seed, is created. The species active skill, Root Binding, is created. The species active skill, World's Intent, is created. The species active skill, Rooting Underground, is created. The species passive skill, Life Manifestation, is created. Oh, the sapling path offers 7 skills rather than 6? If I didn't have a rare class as a choice, then I would surely choose the sapling path, Horus couldn't help but say after seeing the things the sapling path offered. Well then, let's check the Energistus variant. Walnut sapling, Wind Energistus, special, existence level, inanimate grade, A. Accepting the blessings of the world, the branch stays rooted to one place, getting stronger passively as time passes. It doesn't mean that the sapling couldn't move though. Having a lot of energy within its body, it has gained the ability of manipulating this energy and using it to do unfathomable things. With its strong affinity with the wind element, all of its attacks are imbued with the element of wind, gaining an edge over normal classes. The special class active skill, Lowest Spell Core, Wind variant, is created. The special class active skill, Energy Sacrifice, is created. The special class passive skill, Wind Energy Core, is created. The special class passive skill, Wind Energistus Seed, is created. The species active skill, Root Binding, is created. The species active skill, World's Intent, is created. The species active skill, Rooting Underground, is created. The species passive skill, Life Manifestation, is created. Oh, Horus' eyes lit up after seeing that a spell core skill was given to this class if he evolved into it. So that means if I evolved into an Energistus variant, I wouldn't need to evolve my offensive skill into a spell core skill anymore. I could use it to surprise my enemies then. There's also something called an energy core, though I might find that out once I evolve into the rare class. Wind Walnut Spiritus. Wind Walnut Spiritus, rare, existence level, inanimate grade, a not wanting to delve the path of the branch formosus, nor the sapling, the branch has decided to shed its stick body and delve both paths, becoming a Spiritus, a pseudo-sentient spirit. Spiritus can come in many shapes and sizes, even having many forms as well, but they're mostly known for their great control over their energy, manipulating it to do things that are impossible for a normal mage. Spells learned by a Spiritus are of the Spirit series, spells that can be controlled even after casted, as if they had a spirit of their own. Since the branch has great affinity with the wind element, the Spiritus also gains this affinity as well, imbuing its attacks with the wind element, setting itself from other Spiritus and other classes. The rare class active skill, Lowest Spirit Spell Core, Wind variant, is created. The rare class active skill, Spirit Energy Sacrifice, is created. The rare class active skill, Spirit Channeling, is created. The rare class passive skill, Spirit Energy Core, Wind variant, is created. The rare class passive skill, Spiritus Seed, is created. The rare species active skill, Form Morph, is created. The rare species active skill, Wrath of the Spiritas, is created. The rare species active skill, Unyielding Spiritas, is created. The rare species passive skill, Treader of Two Paths, the rare species passive skill, Spirit and Life Vessel Manifestation, is created. Seeing that the rare class offers even more skills, Horus finally chooses his evolution and confirms it without hesitation. Not long after, he falls unconscious just like how he fell unconscious after evolving to a B-grade inanimate. A few minutes later, a notification sound left unheard by Horus popped up. Ding! Horus, Wind Walnut Branch, has evolved into Horus, Wind Walnut Spiritas. Chapter 21. After Horus fell unconscious in Tempest Cliff, multiple sticks of various grades noticed his vulnerable body and wanted to kill him for experience. Of course, being sticks of at least the A grade, they had souls that allowed them to think and comprehend abstract things, one being greed. It's not a greed for material things like money since they were only sticks and money is somewhat abstract to them. Rather, it's a greed for power, an intangible object that anyone can gain as long as they train hard enough. As for them, gaining power is equivalent to them leveling up and evolving into a higher being, perhaps even becoming sentient. So seeing Horus' vulnerable body that has a lot of SP within it, almost all of the sticks surrounding Horus couldn't help but charge forward and attack him. But that was their mistake. All of a sudden, Horus' body that was doing nothing on the ground burst into multiple pieces that dealt a lot of damage to the surrounding sticks. This explosion wasn't an explosion that was on the macroscopic level where Horus was turned into multiple splinters, but rather at the microscopic level. This meant that all of the sticks here were hit with Horus cells that held immense energy thanks to the large amount of SP he had. All of the sticks who were hit by this noticed their durability rapidly declining, some having half of the durability, while some ending up in a critical state. Of course, being sticks that had souls, they knew when to stop. Since they could easily be killed by the sticks beside them, they activated their movement skills that was boosted by the power of the wind within the Tempest Cliff and ran away, leaving Horus alone for the time being. An hour has passed since Horus started evolving. It was only at this moment that his body exploded. Well, it would be wrong to say that his body exploded, but rather, it was going through a state of reformation. With his body's cells being far apart from one another, each of these gradually transformed into a semi-intangible form, one that could change between being corporeal and incorporeal. This type of cell was the basic unit of life for Spiritas, a semi-intangible cell that held Horus energy and soul, the anima. After a few more hours, all of the cells that make up Horus' body has turned into anima. At this moment, the moon and stars were hanging up high in the pitch-black sky, although the Tempest Cliff was still dark. For some reason, the anima that made up Horus' body glowed a faint green, showing his affinity with the wind. Even as of now, no sticks dared to intrude on Horus' evolution. The accidental show of might that Horus did was enough to scare them away, allowing Horus to evolve smoothly. All of the anima that was scattered a while ago started to converge towards Horus' soul that was left as Horus' body exploded. The anima then started to permeate through Horus' soul, forming a connection with his soul. Once the connection was successfully formed, a burst of green light appeared around Horus' new body. At this point in time, he was not a branch of the walnut race anymore, rather he had reformed his stick body into a better body. Although it may not be a human body, it was still better than being a stick. He was now a Spiritas of the walnut race. But for some reason, after the anima combined with Horus' soul, the anima rearranged itself into a branch-like shape. It was not known why this happened, but one thing was for sure. Horus is now a Spiritas that looked like a glowing green stick. XXXX Continent, Seraph Kingdom, an unknown tower. This tower was a special tower constructed by the Seraph Kingdom, not only for reconnaissance and show of might, but it was also a place for those who had classes related to magic delve in. That's why for people who frequently enter the tower, it was called the Arcana Tower. Within the Arcana Tower, Dane currently had his eyes closed as a blue crystalline orb floated in front of him, with an image flashing every so often within the orb. After telling Prince Vanadier the true name of the branch Dane found, Prince Vanadier ordered him to track the Wind Walnut branch at all costs. Though Dane wanted to decline the offer, Prince Vanadier told him that 20% of the tower's assets will go to him once he successfully captures the branch. So he had no choice but to do it. I searched all over the desolate forest already and the branch isn't there. I've also searched Corsa Town in case the stick flew there, but it's not there as well. Dane couldn't help but sigh as he opened his eyes, taking a glance at the map he placed on a nearby desk before looking back at the orb. Many people would think of Dane as a handsome man. He had black hair that was neatly combed, and black irises that exuded wisdom and intelligence once anyone looked at it. Combine that with his rimmed glasses and his crimson-red robe that shows his rank of authority within the Arcana Tower, it would be weird for any woman to not blush in front of him. As he was still focusing on the orb, a finger tapped on his shoulder, making him turn his head around to look at the person. After recognizing who it was, Dane gave a light smile. Well, if isn't my student Aria. What seems to be the problem? Aria was Dane's only student as she was the only one who was able to meet his requirements. Of course, if you had a rank 4 high mage as your teacher, you'd soar high, right? Aria was a girl around 15 years of age that had hair of a light green color. Her irises were colored blue like the deep ocean, while her lips were tinted light pink. Anyone looking at the girl would unnoticeably end up having a light smile in their face. Aria clutched on her clean gray robe and then looked at her teacher Dane. Her legs slightly trembled as she asked, Teacher, I have achieved the maximum level of a rank 2 acolyte, but I don't know how to rank up to a rank 3 mage. Could you tell me how to rank up? That fast? Dane put the orb he was looking at on the nearby desk before looking at Aria with shock. He took Aria as her student only 2 years ago. Most of the time, it would take 5 years for a student at rank 1 novice acolyte to reach the maximum level of rank 2 acolyte, as they had to increase their intelligence stat and MP, not to mention their spell repertoire. How high is your intelligence right now, and how much MP can you hold at maximum? Tell me how much spells you know how to cast and their level as well, Dane replied as he knew that the requirements to rank up were different for every person. Aria pondered for a bit before replying, my intelligence stat is at 72, the maximum amount of MP I can hold is 110, and I know about 12 spells, 11 of them are level 0 spells, while the remaining one is a lower level 1 spell. Oh my god. Dane couldn't help but mutter. This student in front of me is a true genius. All of a sudden, Dane got a flash of inspiration as he hurriedly infused his MP on the orb, showing an image of a stick in the center, surrounded by torrential winds. I knew it. Since it was a stick of the wind element, it would come here eventually. Seeing that her teacher was currently absorbed in something, Aria stood behind her teacher, waiting for him to answer. But after a while, Aria heard a weird sound from his teacher. Not long after, his teacher stood up and shouted in surprise. Eh? Dane couldn't believe what he's seeing through the orb. The branch transformed into a semi-intangible being that he thought was only seen in legends. It's a spiritus. The sun was up high in the sky, illuminating everything within the Tempest Cliff. At this moment, Horus awakened. Chapter 22. Ak. At the time Horus woke up, the first thing he felt was that his soul hurt immensely. It was as if his soul was shredded into multiple pieces, but as Horus took a closer look, that was indeed the case. All of the cells on his body were now infused with a part of his soul, allowing him to feel a sense of oneness with his body. If Horus were to compare his feeling of being one with his body back then, it would be like comparing someone who had just used the sword the first time to someone who had trained with the sword for many years. That was what he felt. Afterwards, he looked at his new body, the body of a spiritus. Eh? Why the heck do I still look like a branch? Horus could spot the differences between his previous body and his current body with just one glance. The first difference was the cells on his body. If the cells on his body back then were like cardboard boxes, then the cells on his body right now were like non-Newtonian fluid. If Horus wanted to, he could change his body into any shape he liked. But for some reason, the instincts built into his body seemed to agree that his normal form would be that of a stick, rather than that of a human. He had the body of a stick, but the soul of a human, not the body and soul of a stick. After pondering it for a bit, he just sighed to himself. Whatever, I can change into different shapes whenever I like, so that's always a plus. He also noticed that the walnuts he used to have in his previous evolution were now gone, making him look like a normal branch, except for the fact that his body was always glowing green. As he was wondering about the changes that took place in his body and what kind of skills the rare classes offer, the bombardment of notification sounds came. Ding. 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 Your stats shall now be changed to conform to your new form. Toughness has been changed to tenacity. Thickness has been changed to vitality. Shell hardness has been changed to spirit. Looking at this, Oris easily understood why his stats were changed. Since I'm not a branch anymore, but instead another thing altogether, the names of my stats have been changed. I don't know if that's just for aesthetic or if it serves any purpose at all. Of course, the notifications didn't stop there. After getting the notification screen about his stats being changed, he got another notification screen regarding skill changes. As some of your skills have become obsolete due to your current form, the system has adjusted these skills to conform to your new form. Eh? The changes even go that far? Oris felt that these changes may have some significance to it. Your movement skill, Tempest Roll, has been changed to Tempestuous Spiritus Glide. Your offensive skill, Nut Trident Triad, has been changed to Spirit Lance of Three Worlds. Your passive skill, Purified SP Storage, has been changed to Purified Spiritus SP Vessel. Your passive skill, Revitalizing Fruit Creation, has been changed to Revitalizing Anima Creation. By the looks of it, Wind Affinity and Soul Perception Eye hasn't been affected by changes at all, Oris said to himself. Tempest Burst as well. Of course, he wouldn't forget about his godly passive skill being unaffected as well, but that was probably a given since it was given to him by Kurahana, a goddess capable of wielding powers unimaginable by Oris. He didn't bother checking the details of his skills since for the most part it would remain unchanged, save for the flavor text contained in each skill. Now that I think about it, what is a Spiritus anyway? Oris tried to accept his current body, but he still couldn't wrap his head around it since it was on the extreme opposite of a branch. A branch was hard and stiff, while his body, which was said to be the body of a Spiritus according to the system, could be comparable to non-Newtonian fluid or slime that can hold its own shape. Wanting to know the answers, Oris asked. And the system answered. Ding. A Spiritus is a being that is said to only exist in an incorporeal form, yet it can create a corporeal form if need be. It absorbs energy from its surroundings to sustain its form. As for the user, the Spiritus formed was from the fusion of two different paths, the branch formosus path focusing on the spirit, and the sapling path focusing on life. With this fusion, the user attained a body of a Spiritus variant of its previous branch form, having a small part of sentience and spirit. Of course, being a Spiritus, it is able to manipulate and wield energy to a great extent as its normal Spiritus counterpart. After hearing the answer the system gave to him, Oris' eyes gleamed as he said, so that's how it was. Since I came from a branch, my Spiritus form is that of a branch. And wait. Did it just say that a Spiritus has some sentience and spirit within them? At this grade? Oris tried to deny it at first, but it seemed that that was the case. Since he could move his body more flexibly compared to when he was just a branch, and even think faster than before thanks to his evolution, it only meant one possibility. A false animate being. A false animate, in other words, an inanimate showing the characteristics of an animate being like using their brains to strategize. In this case, a false animate would be equivalent to those inanimates at the S grade or X grade, yet Oris was able to obtain this form at the A grade. How could Oris not be excited? If I evolved to the X grade, I might obtain a pseudo-animate form, allowing me to speed my leveling up by manifolds. Although a pseudo-animate and a false animate sound similar, they were vastly different, with a pseudo-animate having a form that was more human-like in shape, even allowing them to converse with animates, albeit with limited vocabulary. Nonetheless, Oris had something to look forward to in the future. He noticed that there were notification screens to look at, so he focused on seeing what features or possible skills were added thanks to him becoming an A grade. The ally system has been enabled. The ally system, Oris said to himself. He almost forgot about the system since it had become useless to him, who used to play alone in ISE back then. I wonder if I could grab some allies who would help me out in the long run. Thanks to the ally system being enabled, the ally appraisal skill has been obtained, allowing the user to see the stats of their ally. Seeing that the ally appraisal skill is similar to the effects the system's identification holds, the two skills have fused together into a better skill, named the species analysis skill. A better identification skill? Oris was surprised to see this. I've never seen one before. I wonder what benefit it brings. Thanks to the ally system being enabled, the befriend skill has been obtained, allowing the user to obtain allies by befriending them in the world of Eridenia rather than rely on the allies gacha system. Seeing that this one was the final notification screen, Oris could finally let out a sigh of relief. All of a sudden, another notification screen popped up, in which Oris read it, only to end up gasping in shock. Ding! 1 OS point has been obtained. Chapter 23. Ding! 1 OS point has been obtained. Eh? Oris couldn't believe what he was looking at. He closed his non-existent eyes and rubbed it with his non-existent fingers, thinking that it was a dream. After a few seconds, he opened his eyes once more, only to see the notification screen still in front of him. Thinking that he was still hallucinating, he pinched his non-existent skin, which caused him some mild pain, yet didn't let the notification screen go away. Seeing that it wouldn't go away, Oris couldn't help but sigh. Not long after, he bursted out in joy. Woohoo! Another OS point. Although he took evolving into a higher existence level as his main priority, he still wanted to obtain another OS point since for some reason it locked his memories and even delayed his skills from leveling up at the right time. At the moment, he wasn't even sure if his skills were at the correct level. Anyways, now that I know that evolving to a higher existence level gives me an OS point, I can now rest easy. Oris couldn't help but feel unimaginable joy while in the hell-named Tempest Cliff. But wait a minute. All of a sudden, a thought flashed in Oris' mind since it seemed peculiar. System, why wasn't I given an OS point when I evolved to a B-grade inanimate? Ding! Of course, excluding skill level ups, the system would answer at the shortest instant possible. The user has not met the requirements to modify the system's OS. Eh? What do you mean by that? Oris was confused. Am I lacking in level or something? Ding! The user has not met the minimum requirement for opening the OS back then, which was the synchronization rate. Though this system is based in the user's soul, the system can only undergo modification once the soul has a connection to the body. Oris pondered for a bit before shaking his head. Though it sounds like some nonsense to me, I guess there's a profound meaning to it. Bah, who the hell cares? I got my OS point. Open OS. Ding! Existence Evolution OS points, 2 level up synchronization, 0/10, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point artificial intelligence, 0/1, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point memory DLC, 0/3, cost to upgrade, 1 OS point. The Existence Evolution OS screen looked like it was untouched when compared to before, but compared to before, Oris now had 2 points to spend rather than 1. Now with Oris knowing where the OS points came from, he could now rest easy with the points being scarce. Well, it was still scarce, but he knew how to get them at least. Ever since he found out about the EEOS, the first thing he wanted to upgrade out of all the choices was the level up synchronization option. He didn't want to fight at full power against his enemy before ultimately knowing his power was actually sealed. So he did. Upgrade, level up synchronization. Ding! Unlike skills and evolutions which had a confirmation screen before fully confirming an option, the OS section of the system only gave you the time before choosing the option as the confirmation. Level up synchronization has been upgraded to level 1/10. Delayed level ups have been removed. Oris couldn't help but smile at the words that came from the system. Now, he could rest assured that he would be fighting at full power every time. Now that's done, I only have 1 point left to use. After that was done, Oris went back to the OS section of the system and looked at the options. Memory DLC. Though it didn't sound like much and it didn't affect Oris' current progress, it had intense importance to his progress in the future. He also noticed that at times when he tried to remember something, although his memories feel like all have been retained, he always feels a haze obstructing his view from that memory. Oris looked around his surroundings for a bit and checked for any sign of enemies, to which there was none even as of now. Seeing that there were still no enemies in his surroundings, Oris then commanded to the system after giving enough thought. Upgrade, Memory DLC. Since he was still an A-grade inanimate, there was still room for improvement. He might have missed something along his way to the Tempest Cliff that would allow him to obtain skills unobtainable by sticks at his current stage. Nonetheless, it would be a beneficial change for him. Ding! Memory DLC has been upgraded to level 1/3. Part of the user's memories have been unsealed. Within the vast universe, Kurahana's space. Ding! 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 A melodious chime could be heard ringing from the orb Kurahana was staring at. Kurahana's eyes widened as she looked at the thing that happened to the stick through the orb. Eh? A wood spirit? Kurahana couldn't help but frown at the thought. She needed a piece of wood infused with a strong soul as the main ingredient for her transcendent deity weapon. But to think that this Oris chose a path that didn't suit her needs made her somewhat irritated. But then, she looked further into Oris' current form and then mumbled as a professional craftsman, that's not the case. He hasn't turned into a wood spirit, he's still a piece of wood, although it can change forms. Haha, if I used that as my catalyst, I wonder what properties it could show. Letting her mind run wild, Kurahana smiled at the thought. All of a sudden, ding, ding, ding. A melodious chime rang once more, forcing Kurahana to snap back to reality and look at the orb in front of her. Hey, he has finally upgraded that option, huh? I guess this will hasten the process of turning him into archaic soul wood. Since I tampered with his memories anyway. Tee. A nuclear explosion, that was what Oris felt when part of his memories were unlocked. In an instant, like the neurons in a brain connecting with one another as they send electrical impulses at lightning speed, the unsealed memories within Oris' soul quickly connected with the memories he previously had before upgrading. Special grinding spots, places where he could get special skills, bosses which garnered some special items, all of that were unlocked within Oris' mind. Though at some point, it abruptly stopped since he had only unlocked one part of the Memory DLC option. Nonetheless, the amount of unsealed memories that Oris obtained were enough for him to improve at breakneck speeds in his current stage. For all of them were memories of his early game stages. Chapter 24. Ha! After over half an hour, Oris finally assimilated all of the unsealed memories he obtained and let out a sigh of relief afterwards. To think that there has been mistakes in my ways. After reclaiming all of his old memories and then cross-referencing it to his current form, Oris couldn't help but feel disappointed. Of course, his current form was plenty strong, but if I stayed at the B grade for longer, I might have unlocked a unique class instead of a rare one. Since ISE was a game that held infinite possibilities for stick evolution, that meant that one could stay at a certain grade and accumulate enough power to evolve to a higher grade with a class of the rare or even unique level. Well, there's no medicine for regret, so I'll just have to be the best Spiritas there is, Oris said to himself as the plan he formulated before part of his memories were unsealed gradually changed to a better plan. First off, let's check my current stats. But before he opened his status screen, he then remembered, I forgot that I haven't formed any fruits yet. Wait, it's better to call them animus at this point. Without delay, 16 animus the size of walnuts hovered around Oris' body as they glowed a faint green color while the faint sound of wind could be heard surrounding them. They also had a mysterious connection to Oris' body, wherein Oris will never find out. Ding! Revitalizing anima creation has leveled up. Ho! Oris let out a smile. I guess my investment wasn't in vain. With the skill leveling up once more, he formed another green anima. Now with all of that done, open status screen. Ding! Oris, level 1/10, experience, 0 out of 10 species, wind walnut spiritas, rare, existence level, inanimate grade, A, HP, 70/70ths, SP, 90/90ths stats, tenacity, 15, vitality, 20, spirit, 25 synchronization rate, 40% in used experience points, 150 in used genesis points, 0. Oris looked at his current stats before lightly smiling. As expected from a rare class, the stats are definitely higher than a special or a normal class. It seems that the stat distribution is leaning towards spirit. Does it have something to do with me being a spirit as? Laughing at his own pun, Oris continued to look at the status screen before being awed by his HP amount. 70 HP. For an A-grade inanimate, that's already high. The highest HP I've ever seen from a newly advanced A-grade inanimate was only around 40. Oris pondered for a bit before a thought crossed his mind. Might it be because of the class seed? The class seed, the passive skill that differentiated B-grade inanimates from A-grade inanimates. If an offensive skill alone was enough to become a gap for C grades and B grades, then the class seed was the gap between B grades and A grades. Class seeds usually boost HP and then other things according to the player's class, but sometimes there were extremely special class seeds that allowed players to rule over others of the same grade. Enable short skill and evolution info. Identify Spirita's seed. Oris promptly commanded. Ding. The option short skill and evolution info has been enabled. Ding. Spirita's seed, LV1, a class seed that grows with the user's level, specifically tailored for the exemplary energy manipulation of the Spiritas, which could be considered as an elite mage class. The Spirita's HP is boosted by 50 HP, user's spirit times 2, the cost of magic spells have been halved, further halved by the Spirit Energy Core, Wind variant, all skills and spells deal 10% more damage. Ha! As expected. It was the class seed. Oris looked at the details of the seed and couldn't help but compare it to the class seed he used in his previous life as an A-grade inanimate, a Worry-Eye seed. The Worry-Eye seed only doubled the amount of HP the player had while at max level it quadrupled it. But this seed though, if I reach the max level of being an A-grade inanimate and this seed follows, who knows what kind of things I can do? Of course, this class seed was the reason why the branch Formosus Oris fought against had extremely high HP when compared to the Sakura Tamer Oris also fought. As he continued to read the skill description of his class seed, another skill catched his eye. Spirit Energy Core, Wind variant. Oris muttered. Is that the reason why my SP has been reduced to 90? Before he evolved, Oris had an amount of SP that was over 150 at least. Now that he has evolved, he expected to retain the same amount of SP, but instead it was halved. Was it because of this skill? Identify, Spirit Energy Core, Wind variant. Ding. Spirit Energy Core, Wind variant, LV, 1/3, grade, C, mortal, as the Spiritas that can wield energy like it was a sword, the purity and power of SP, stick points, is lacking. Thus the Spiritas has decided to transform this SP into a more condensed and purified version of SP, naming it SP, Spirit Points. This SP is stored within the Spirit Energy Core located above the Spiritas SP vessel. Although the amount of SP usable has been halved, its power has amplified the effects of skills. Imbued with the element of wind, all attacks have the wind element attached to them. All skills and spells that use SP now utilize SP, thus dealing 5% increased damage. All skills and spells that use SP now have the wind element attributed to them. Oris couldn't help but let out a sigh in wonder. 15% increased damage. If I had that back then when I fought that branch Formosus, how much damage would I have dealt? Noticing that he was still thinking of the possibilities of the class while in a dangerous place like this, Oris snapped himself back to reality and then started to head towards a direction with his newly modified Tempestuous Spiritas Glide. Tempestuous Spiritas Glide. Damn, that's a mouthful. Whoosh! In an instant, his movement speed that was already at a rate of over 260 meters per hour came into effect and allowed Oris to move at a fast speed, although still not fast when compared to human standards. Open map. Ding. In an instant, a screen showing the entirety of Tempest Cliff appeared in front of Oris' field of vision. Looking at the whole area, he then placed a marker on a place he was sure that he would survive in thanks to his newfound strength and memories. Would you like set a marker to the Tempest Cliff's Tempest Ruin? The system asked. Of course I do. With the help of my memories, this is nothing. Oris replied with brimming confidence. Since he has recovered all of his early game memories, the Tempest Cliff that looked impossible to him back then now looked like a peaceful park. This was because his early game memories didn't just encompass his memories of his God tier account, it also encompassed the memories of his other accounts that played different classes. Luckily, one of those accounts traversed to the Tempest Cliff as well. Ding! Within seconds, a blue path overlaid on the ground within Aura's field of vision and a blue triangle started to hover over Aura's body with the number 10,000 over it. Aura looked at this and grinned. Although it may look like a lot at the moment, this would change when he entered the Tempest Ruin. I came to this place to enhance my wind affinity skill, but since that thing is also in this place, I should grab that as well. Chapter 25. Although 10,000 meters didn't sound like much to a normal person who could traverse that distance in a matter of a few hours, to Horus, it also wasn't much. Sure, he would have to take a lot more time to traverse that distance, but Horus had a skill in mind that would lessen the time needed to traverse this distance. In other words, it's a skill that increased his movement speed. As to how Horus found it, it was due to him looking through the forums of the game when he was starting out another account, wanting to reduce the time needed to traverse distances. If it wasn't for his memories being unsealed, this skill would have been left behind. I wonder if they're still in that place, Horus started to hypothesize to pass the time. Then again, Kurohana brought me into this world, so she might have changed a few things here and there. What Horus was referring to was the two skills within the Tempest Ruin. That's right, it wasn't just one, but two skills. The skill that Horus wanted to get was a passive skill named Blessing of the Tempest. Alongside that ruin, there was another skill beside that passive skill named Stick Regeneration. That's right, it was a healing skill. Blessing of the Tempest would drastically decrease the time for me to head back to the Lesser Experience Haven, and Stick Regeneration would help me recover HP while I fight that boss. Horus thought about how these two skills would help out in his plan. Of course, they didn't clash at all and instead boosted his chances of achieving his end goal of being the boss of the Lesser Experience Haven. After making sure that his plans were all achievable at his current state, he took a look at his stats again since there was still a long way before he reached the center. Ding. Horus looked at his status screen and noticed that he still had 150 unused experience points he could use. Horus tried to recall where he got that experience and remembered that it came from killing the branch Formosus before he evolved. Horus didn't hesitate to use it all up since it would allow him to deal more damage whenever he had to fight. Use unused experience points, he commanded. Ding. Horus has leveled up 3 times. With the unused experience points being used up, Horus was able to increase his level to level 4, thus only needing 6 more levels to reach the max level instead of 9 if he had no unused experience points. Horus looked at his status screen once more and saw that he gained 18 HP, which put his HP and SP at almost the same amount. Afterwards, he just looked at the surroundings for around 5 hours since there were no enemies around him as he traveled. Indeed. Horus wanted to test out the Spiritus skills. XX Continent, Seraph Kingdom, Arcana Tower. It's a Spiritus. Dane couldn't believe what he was looking at. The being inside the orb showed a state of being fluid-like inconsistency while maintaining a somewhat semi-corporeal appearance. Since Dane was a rank 4 high mage who had accumulated a lot of knowledge, he was able to recognize a Spiritus from the myths at first glance. I shouldn't miss this chance. Dane's expression was filled with excitement. Arya, Dane's disciple, looked at her teacher's face and couldn't help but secretly let out a sigh of relief. If her teacher was happy, she might get additional benefits. Nonetheless, she still didn't disturb her teacher in fear of breaking his happy mood. Dane instantly closed his eyes and placed one of his hands over the crystal orb he was looking at as a faint blue glow started to emanate from his hand. As his hand started to glow, he also started to chant as small beads of sweat started to drip from his forehead, 4th circle. Aquis Supris. Holos Singulis. Aquis Holos Estul. Triholos Tracer. Within seconds of incantation, the faint blue glow surrounding Dane's hand started to converge under his palm as 4 magic circles that overlapped one another started to form. As this was happening, multiple magic runes were inscribed on the circles, thus using up Dane's MP. Even though a lot was used since it was level 4 spell, it didn't hinder him at all. After a minute of supplying the magic circles with MP, the 4 magic circles then condensed into one magic circle that was extremely small in size, allowing it to remain undetected. Dane then opened his eyes as multiple beads of sweat covered his face, yet this accentuated his handsomeness rather than negate it. He looked at the magic circle floating on his hand and looked at the spiritas within the orb. Not long after, he shot the magic circle through the windows of the floor he currently resided in. Magic tracking. Swoosh! Within seconds, the magic circle started to expand to a size that was larger than the floor Dane resided in before completely dissipating into thin air. Arya looked at her teacher's incantation and couldn't help but have cold sweat drip from her forehead. According to what she read, the magic tracking skill was one of the hardest level 4 magic spells to conjure, yet her teacher was able to do so? Arya couldn't help but look at her teacher in a new light since this was her first time seeing her teacher cast a spell. Dane, who was finished with his business, then looked back at Arya as he placed the orb neatly on the nearby table. With his mood still being great, he grabbed a piece of parchment on the table and then raised it up in front of Arya's face. "Well then," Dane said in a cheerful voice. "Since something good has happened, I'll make an ideal rank-up process for you, my student. 4th circle. Holos missilis apersalii. Aquis status scale singulus. Biholos hidens aptidar sapiens. By aquis suppress potencell. Whoosh. Greater appraisal. Tempest Cliff. It has been 20 hours since Aura started to head towards the Tempest ruin found at the center of the Tempest Cliff. Along the way, he tried to comprehend the wind that surrounded him and actually succeeded in doing so. Ding! Wind affinity has leveled up. Wind affinity has reached the max level. Wind affinity has met the necessary requirements and is ready to evolve. Of course, Horus was stuck in a daze, and it only took Horus a few minutes to max out wind affinity. Nonetheless, he still moved. He also checked out the 3 new active skills that are related to his class, the Spiritas, a variant of the mage class that was proficient in controllable spells. After these 20 hours, he was still itching to gain some experience in fighting against the branches of Tempest Cliff in his current state. Ding! Tempestuous Spiritas Glide has leveled up. Oh, it leveled up. Horus was slightly surprised to see that his movement skill leveled up. As skills evolve to higher grades, the experience needed to level up grows larger and larger. Then again, I have my solutions to these kinds of things, Horus said to himself as a side plan was already formed while he was traveling. It was related to his skills. Rustle. Eh? Horus looked around and saw a branch that was a few times larger than his body. It had roots sprouting out of one end as it exuded a great sense of vitality. Horus looked at this and couldn't help but snigger. He stopped in his tracks and rotated his body to look at the branch. Haha. Although you're already a young tree, are you ready to become my stepping stone? Thanks, guys. This was Reincarnated as a Stick. Hope you enjoyed listening to this awesome novel. Thank you for listening, fellow humans, and have a wonderful day.